Hey, Motzoei, Cosima, Echa Chutza, Mo, Motzoei, Cosima. Yafuzu Isaac Chutza Masai 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 Kazima Yafuzu Masai 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 Kazima Yafuzu. Okay, it seems like this. It's like half catching on. It has. Oh, it's coming. Okay, it's just like slower because I'm using my a narrower bandwidth.
Motzoei Kosimai Sheyafutzu
Hey, Motzoei. We keep on singing. No, get something. Okay, this finally works. Okay, we're on. Okay, all right. So, well, okay.
That's another good one.
Okay. So I mean, the good news is it seems like it's catching on. It caught on to Facebook, but it's taking slower. So welcome, Danny. For good to see you too. Wait, hang on. I just need to figure out something. I'm hearing myself here. 1 second. Yeah. Hang on, please. Right, I'm just gonna have to. Give me a moment, please. Wait. Okay, I just went off of that, but I do want to still make sure that everything's in order. Una momento. Okay, continue. So that song, of course. I mean, when this was like one of the Rebbe's most popular songs at Farbrengens. Like a lot of major Farbrengens, especially during the weekday Farbrengens, we would sing this song, and the Rebbe would also like singing it at high speed at times. He would pick it up, right? He would go, and you could even, I'm sure, go on YouTube and find Farbrengen footage of the Rebbe singing the song. And of course, it was such an amazing, not just the song, but the saying. So do people know the background of the saying? What it is? What's going on? Does anyone know?
The famous story of the Baal Shem Tov and Mashiach.
Right. So and where is it from? How do we know it?
I'm not sure, but I only heard like 3 months ago, after hearing that, thinking the whole story, the whole life. I only heard 3 months ago that there's a continuation to the story, to the conversation, that it goes on a couple more sentences further. But I only found that out like 3 months ago.
Okay, so we'll explain what that means.
And the continuation.
So right. So the story is like this. If we could speak, because it's about the Baal Shem Tov. Tonight is his birthday, as we mentioned before, right? So let me just finish something here. All right, we're getting somewhere, hopefully. All right. Just certain bad things that just are taking a little longer. So, anyways, everything's good. Let's work on it. Uh, so the Baal Shem Tov, yeah, we know so many teachings from him and about his students, especially the Maggid and the Talmud Yaakov Yosef, and there's even this amazing collection of stories of the Baal Shem Tov, known as the Shivchei HaBaal Shem Tov. Here, as you see on the screen, this is a color. By the way, this image is not of the Baal Shem Tov, as it has been attributed. It's actually of, I think,
Another
Rabbi Eliyahu Baal Shem, the Baal Shem of London.
right.
There was a Baal Shem in, I think, the early 1700s or mid 1700s.
Yeah.
And he was independently a very fascinating character. And not too long ago, they actually found his manuscripts in like maybe in one of the old schools or the Jews college, something related in London, in a desk or something, and it had like his like practical Kabbalah stuff. And he was also somewhat suspected of being a Sabbatian, and though there was no final conclusive proof. He also had he was doing certainly his own really out there Kabbalistic practices, not just teachings, even locking himself up in isolation and sounds almost like a Tower of London scene or something. Yeah, and there has been more that has come out about him, about Rebbe Leo Baal Shem in the last couple of decades. There are a couple academics into it. There was he's actually a Russian Jewish academic. I forget his name. He's done some research in this not too long ago. My dear friend and someone who's been involved in it at the very beginning, Eli Moseson, is actually his specialty is the magical practices and segulot and such of the Baal Shem Tov. He's gone through manuscripts, not only that libraries, but also that are in private hands. And in fact, so this is not okay. This is not in his actual PhD, but it is other research material. I think he's even published on something on it in some academic journal. And for example, there are even some manuscripts that were in auction houses like a half a decade or decade ago that had very original stuff that people didn't know, like Segula of the Baal Shem Tov to heal a home that is having something that sounds like tzarat or mold or evil spirits in the home or something. And there's a whole thing what to do, what to put into the four corners of the walls, walking around the house, reciting certain. I don't know if it's just psukim or if it's other stuff too. And there's the other segula. One of the few authoritative material. My point is that I was going to say that there isn't too much contemporaneous materials that say, this is from the Baal Shem Tov. This is, and in fact, as we know, that the Jewish historians in the 1800s, such as Gretz and others, denied that the Baal Shem Tov even existed. And there were just different forms, and some said, "Oh, maybe he's based on something else, someone or something, or he wasn't exactly yet, as all the details of his life is not as it cannot be proven, especially let's say from the Shivchei Baal Shem Tov stuff. though there is a lot of magical and supernatural material in there. The question is, can the Shifchei Baal Shem Tov itself be used as a historical source? It seems, and there were some academics that were able to correlate different dates and places and events as being confirmed from extemporaneous sources. So, of the few things that we know is mamash from the Baal Shem Tov, and we could speak about this different things. So let's say, for example, there's the Siddur of the Baal Shem Tov that is in fact, the Lubavitch Library, and most recently they made it. I mean, it was already largely made available, but yet not every page of the Siddur was made available until just like a half a year ago, when the Chabad Library, um, made 500,000 pages of manuscript from the library available online, including the Siddur. It's been like unleashed a whole like treasure trove, not magneto, but some libraries, a lot of libraries have been doing that recently. JTS has done the Hebrew University, the National Library in Israel. You could just read a lot of original manuscripts, just facsimile. Even the Russian State Library, the very library that under which officially the Chabad collection that's still in Russia is under, though it is in a Lubavitch building. There's been like this compromise worked out, but so a lot of the manuscripts and texts that are in Russia have been made available online. I've done like research from these manuscripts. I mean, of course, it's not the same like really being in the musty library and turning the pages and all that, but it's certainly making things available. So there is a lot. So let's say again the Siddur, the Baal Shem Tov. There's this in itself is a whole discussion subject, and I don't know, and you don't get sidetracked it's a little bit with that, but other materials, let's say that we know is authentic, is there are 2-3 letters of the Baal Shem Tov. And let's say one is even an old copy it seems like within just a few decades of the Baal Shem Tov. So it sounds like it seems authoritative enough. Some say it is the Baal Shem Tov's own handwriting. It doesn't seem so. There's another letter. I think there was a copy of it, maybe printed, actually, in which he actually responds to a advice to a student about health issues, how to take care. So it's a mixture of health and spiritual healing, practical, even what herbs, asavim, take for, like maybe I think it would have to do with the stomach. So there, and okay, and this will be, we'll see soon the cross confirmation. And okay, well, I'll say it right now. Even the let's be the biggest skeptic. Okay, the Baal Shem Tov didn't exist, right? And everything we're saying, including these letters that were just copies, it's not. How did we even know if this is really Baal Shem Tov's handwriting? And then, like the ultimate letter we're going to talk about, which was in print, but still the book was printed decades after the date of the letter. So how do we know this is really true? So in the mid 90s, after the fall of the Iron Curtain, and various archives were made available to researchers, historians, there was an Israeli historian by the name of Moshe Razman. He went to the area of Poland, Carpathian Mountains, what have not Poland. I think it's more like maybe Romania or something. Maybe related.
If it's Carpathians, it might be Romania.
I think, or where's Mezhe? Actually, it was Mezhebush. No, it must have been like Ukraine, right? Something like that. And he went, and he went, and there were still surviving archives from the dukes, the lords, the masters who owned the lands of the area and the villages, and they had ledgers filled with, let's say, both recording people and to collect taxes. So when it comes to the town of Mezhebush, in there, and there's a facsimile, he published this then in the mid-late 90s. There it says that you openly see in the ledger. It says Israel, Baal Shem, like first name, and like just Baal Shem is even used almost like an appellation, or like they didn't even have fully last names then, surnames, but it was used like an added name. So Baal Shem, and then where it says profession, it says medicine man. So I don't know how, and then you look at like the aforementioned letter, and you read the stories in the Shikha about Shem Tov, and you even see. I just saw. Wait 1 second. Hang on. Okay, so like a couple weeks ago, I was in Woodmere, and I found there's an amazing secondhand farm store called Safarim Re something restoration. Hey, yes, and wait,
Yes, Salvador.
wait, and
Got it.
and I'm just
Who's
finishing something. Hello, and yeah, just try to mute yourself, please. Okay, I'm just gonna do it for you. All right. So
Wondering who called my name. That's it.
what again? Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe me. I'm not sure. Oh, someone else maybe. Okay, maybe Yehuda. Or I'm not sure. Be it as it may. So, I went there, and I knew here. I picked up this sefer, this book. It says it's Siach Eliezer Hachadash Al HaTorah. The Siach Elazar was the Yampler Rebbe. There was a Yampler dynasty, and he was a direct descendant of the Baal Shem Tov. And in here, you'll also have, they'll show the yichus even of it. And so I had an older version of it. I actually originally saw it in the Karbach show, and I have my own story of it. Maybe I don't know if I shared it in the past, but I prefer not to publicly. So maybe later if you remind me. So that you have that, but this is actually a 3-in-1 volume. So you have the Siach Elazar. Then you have the second book part is called, show you, the Gulas Urefuas, right? The Gulas and healings. By the very same author, the descendant of the Baal Shem Tov. And I'll show you, and everything, look, it starts in Aleph, for things lost, for blisters, for love, for dealing with enemies, for effects of eyes, not to miscarriage, animals, stomach aches, prison, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going down the Aleph base, and this is just the index of this practical stuff. And so this is a new typeset of it, but even if you open up, like here, right? You see what's going on? I don't fully understand this. I've seen some of these used frequently in healing kameas and such, and but it has almost like Brazil, the Malach stuff, right? It's in there. This was like an old kamea amulet way of writing stuff. That the one we just saw it was for to prevent miscarriage. In fact, so this is all big. So it would not be. So it's not that far out offlandish to say that he may have picked up stuff in the family tradition.
Baruch, could you just hold up the book again, closed, so we can, but keep it still for a moment so we could actually read it, read the cover?
Right here, like this. Is it backwards or you see?
Oh, that's great.
Okay, now I'll show you. This is the manuscript of the document. So, Henry, you see? So, some of these I've heard of or familiar, but many, if not most, yeah, like Agala I heard of, but Ubtul or Masas, the real heard of, but what is Gadis and Paven? Oh yeah, it gets. Incidentally, the last one are 19 stories about the Baal Shem Tov, actually in Yiddish, not in Hebrew. So we see that the Baal Shem Tov was called Baal Shem Tov because he was certainly a practical Kabbalist, but even more, they say he wasn't just a Baal Shem, he was a Baal Shem Tov, taking it to the to heal the soul as much as the body. And in fact, if you look in the Shifrei Baal Shem Tov, there's some ways of his healing sounds like proto-talk therapy. And there are some, and my friend, dear friend and colleague, Eli Motzoei, is also has been made somewhat of the argument that you could see a certain element there. And particularly because even just the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, one general unique approach of the Baal Shem Tov in all his teachings, common or meaning a general shitta of his, is the psychologicalization of Torah. That teaching Torah is not just for a good pshat, understand which it is certainly, but you could take a text of a pasuk or a Mishnah Gemara, Medrash, and even change the pshat of it to its maybe even its opposite meaning. So long as the teaching of applied how it affects the person psychologically and their from their behaviorally, that it's all that it's about the human element, the human psyche part, that Torah is a guide, a all, not just self-help for all, so to speak, but even though it's not just that, but you could find all the solutions and ways to deal with life through Torah. And that also, that state of the mind is not just the heart, because we all know it's about the heart. Even the mind is why it is because the Baal Shem Tov, for example, said he had strong emphasis on the machshavtim, where the person is thinking, there the person is. That so it's not doesn't mean intellectual way of processing. It means awareness of mind, mental powers. Let's put it that way. And as we'll see, maybe when we share a story or two about Baal Shem Tov, how that expressed itself in his life. And you could all go to Shivchei Baal Shem Tov and mamish you find it on every other page. And you know what they say famously about the stories of the Baal Shem Tov, right? If you don't believe in any of them, you're not Bikaris. If you believe in all of them, you're a fool. So what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to believe that they all could have happened. Because the part was that there was so many stories of the Baal Shem Tov on Motzoei Shabbos that there were practically not enough Motzoei Shabbos in Baal Shem Tov's life to have that many Motzoei Shabbos stories. So some of them, therefore, must not be true. Big shaila, right? But it's all very apropos because officially this is all about, we've been focusing on Motzoei Shabbat. In addition to, of course, all the other great, amazing stuff happening time of the year, middle of Elul, Chayil, as we said, and Parsha, of course. So Mamish, but somehow it all ties. When you're focused on some subject, then even when you're involved in other things in your life, let's say a physicist focused on like just cracks some great physics mystery, Mr. immersed in the problem to find a solution for days, weeks, and going shopping in the supermarket, he's going to see his physics quandrum in the canned beans. It's live it through it. So in a way, it's all basically that let's say Shabbos resonates anyways every week when we learn, we find a way to see it also through the prison of Motzoei Shabbos. All the more so this week, it's about Baal Shem Tov, and being that the Baal Shem Tov has all these amazing connections and stories about with Motzoei Shabbos and particularly Malav Malka. In fact, there's a saying says in the Reb Marash of Chabad, and Lubavitch said it, and others say it too, in different versions. But that basically that whoever repeats the story of the Baal Shem Tov on Motzoei Shabbos, it's a skula for Parnasa, right? You heard of this? So the vart is that there's 3 lavdafkas. Lavdafka, a story of the Baal Shem Tov, but it could be a story of any tzaddik. Another version I heard was that lavdafka, a story of the Baal Shem Tov, but it's something else, even like a vart or a nigga. Okay. Second lavdafka is not necessarily Motzoei Shabbos, but any time of the week. And the third lavdafka, not necessarily skula for parnasa, but skula for anything that you need or wish. So usually when we would sit down for Malav Malka around the table, especially if it was like a more formal, if you invited people, friends, made them nice Malav Malka, you would open the Malav Malka with this vart about the 3 lavdafkas. The second vart you'd start over at the beginning, Malav Malka, is the even more famous vart. That which Chassidish Farbrengen can accomplish, even Malach Michal cannot accomplish. And it is connected with Malava Malka too, because in addition to Eliyahu Hanavi, there's a connection of Malach. Well, even though we say also Gavriel, Hamalach Hagaloisi, some say it's Gavriel, but really it's Michal. Hamalach Hagaloisi actually is Michal. So Michal is connected when we say Shabbat. So it's implication. So you make the Malava Malka into a Favrengen. So yeah, make it right. So that becomes that great connection. And of course, the Malava Malka, in addition to eating, you sing the Gunim and say Savart, and there was always a story, preferably of Baal Shem Tov, not from one of the Chassidish, from a Rebbe for sure. So, L'chaim.
L'chaim u'levracha.
L'chaim to the two luminaries, the Shnei Ma'eres, the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Yisrael ben Eliezer Baal Shem, and to the 2 generations there after him, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya, founder of Chabad. And in fact, there is a legend that when the Alter Rebbe was 3 years old, he encountered the Baal Shem Tov, or he was brought to Baal Shem Tov. Or certainly that Baal Shem Tov heard of him and made it special even during his meal. He said something to the effect that, there's a great luminary. There's 2 things. One legend in Chabad is that when he was born, that Baal Shem Tov said he feels that a whole new soul came down to the earth. Right? And then, and also having to do during his Upshan, 3 years old, hopefully. Incidentally, when the Alter Rebbe was around 3 years old, it was already written into the Pinkas, the book, the Kehila, the Katan ledger. He written down as a member of the Chaver Kadisha. And then they updated it as he was getting older. I think at 9 years old, and then by his bar mitzvah, they already are calling him like the great Talmid Chacham guy, and elevate his status. But already at youth, he was signed in. Apparently, it was a tradition from prominent families, especially those that felt that their certain child is of special stature, to already record them very early of age. It sounds like almost like the age is lahavdil of like the Buddha, right? That's 3 or 5 years old. Or the Dalai Lama, I mean, right? Or something. There's things like Yanuka, There were Rebbes that were started to be Rebbes before Bar Mitzvah. I'm trying to remember who's the very youngest Rebbe. I think there was a Rebbe, maybe in Kalin Stalin was like 2-3 years old. Or
For people who don't know what Yanuka is.
Yanuka means a Rebbe or someone of great leadership, stature, or great sage who starts off at a young age. I mean, officially it would be someone under Bar Mitzvah, but the term has been expanded to include someone as a teenager too, or even in their early 20s, which if relative to the norm, it just makes the person stand out a lot older. For example, in Sadiger, it is the Rebbe a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, I think, passed away. Sadiger is like straight lineage, son after son, from the Rishner Rebbe, which incidentally, the Rishner himself became Rebbe when he was young, like a teenager. And not only he was like that, his older brother was Rebbe before him, but passed away in his early 20s or something. The great son, and he also became Rebbe as a teenager. And not only that, their father, Simcha Stefan Spenofste, there is, he's not discussed much. He was also a fascinating character. He passed away young, I think, in his 20s, 30s, and that's why the originator and his older brother were orphans. The originator lost his father. I think he was maybe still a kid, maybe I don't know, under 10 years old for sure. So and it seems like even earlier. So their father was the son of the Malach, Avram the Malach. Avram the Malach too. I don't think he passed away that young, but he didn't age either, like to seasoned age. And then their and Avram the Malach's father was the Maggid. The Maggid was rich. Oh, actually, I think it seems like he did make it to his 50s or 60s, but he was not well. He was actually couldn't walk. I think he even had what's it called crutches or something for his feet. Um, but they were so from them. If one would view the Maggid as the beginning of the real flourishing of Chassidus, which like some academics like saying that really the founder of Chassidus wasn't the way we know it, at least, wasn't the Baal Shem Tov himself, but the Maggid, who created more of a court and more of a whole system with students and what have you. But I don't know if that's 100% accurate, because based on the stories, even including in Shifchei Baal Shem Tov that we have in the Baal Shem Tov, it appears that he had enough of a circles. There's theories, like some say, like Rabbi Dr. Professor Heschel had this thing, and yeah, he wrote when he writes about the Baal Shem Tov, he sees the Baal Shem Tov as one one, it's almost like they say about like in the Senate or something, or about the president, like someone who's just one step higher than everyone, like something amongst equals, right? What's the term? I forget. Higher, something about statue, like you're not too above, like absolutely higher than everyone else, but you are seen as the number one person and the leader, but just somewhat higher than everyone else. I think, Professor, the way I understand, I didn't see this in many years, is that there were all these other those that we view or call, like, say, the students of the Baal Shem Tov. Yes, there were students of Baal Shem Tov, but they were more than just students. They were already in the amazing individuals of great, amazing, not just learned, a lot of them of learned stature, which incidentally is a misnomer of those that say Baal Shem Tov was dealing with the simple people, blah blah blah, which is 100% true. I mean, in other words, it's certainly a major part of it. But if you actually go through the stories of the Shifchei Baal Shem Tov, you'll see how much these are people that were rabbis of important communities, and like or Mochiach Rabbi Polna, Mochiach Polna, other towns, or people that even Dayanim, I mean, Chachamim, certain people, in some cases, even like wealthy people, Parnasim, as they're called, people like who run both the political and financial aspects of different communities. In fact, incidentally, the Baal Shem Tov was not such an outlier, so to speak, or I would say wasn't such a wasn't viewed as such a off the track or like bohemian or like rebel. There are all these stories describing the Baal Shem Tov as such. You look right, and in fact, especially in his earlier years, and how he had to like really, people just thought he was just acting bizarre, or even being, or even taking certain, making certain spiritual claims, and doing things or attitudes and what have you that you know, what would make him stand out as someone off, not of the common way of behavior, especially amongst the religious and community. And some place it even says like he would fall asleep in the clois in where all the great great Talmidei Chacham and scholars were studying in Brody, and he was like fall asleep and do a thing outside, and like people didn't even realize that he was really knew, he was great, much greater than he came across as. And in fact, his brother, in fact, there were connections even through through his family, through his wife's family, and his brother-in-law Gershon of Kitov, which will lead to the part we're going to say, and yeah, so he had connections, if I recall, both to the Noid of Yehuda, like two marriages away, something in the family. And then I think to Rabbi Margolius, who was a big halachicist and Kabbalist in Brody. Also has to do with the Sefer Tzaref, the book of a great mystic. Excuse me, that written by the mystic Rabbi Herschel Tzaref in the late 1600s, which has not been published yet, in fact, though it is in manuscripts. You know where to look. Ha ha ha. Hint, hint, hint. And in fact, this was a text that Baal Shem Tov cherished, and it seems like he had a copy of it in Brody, even, and whatever copy even exists in manuscript is in the hands of the descendants of the Baal Shem Tov. It was basically given over to a grandchild of the Baal Shem Tov to make a copy, and it wound up in the Chernobyl Rebbe, who made 5 copies for 5 sons, including one who was a Karliner, a son-in-law. And that way, even though despite the Holocaust, where a lot of like the Karlin copy, it seems like was destroyed, and some others, but there was enough that survived. It seems that from 2 or 3 of the Chernobyl Rebbes and some other sources, that there is enough of it. It's a massive text, all based, it seems like, Kabbalistic interpretation of the Pasuk Shema Yisrael. And it's just full of like a lot of Kabbalah, complex Kabbalah, and you don't really see the Baal Shem Tov's style or way in there. So that in itself is mysterious. I mean, another thing that's interesting, that's mysterious, that Baal Shem Tov would say, I think it's even brought down in Ketzer Shem Tov, which is the most popular book of the Baal Shem Tov's teachings, that he really loved. He would immerse himself in Emunas Videos of Rabbi Saadia Gaon. Emunas Videos of faith and ideas or sciences of Saadia Gaon is seen as the first official book of Jewish philosophy. It's like so not the Baal Shem Tov of a Sefer book to be immersed in. Yet he does, and he does in a way. He sometimes even brings down Torahs from the Rav Saadia Gaon. For example, the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, that the whole Torah is included in the very first letter, whether in of Anochi or in the base of Bereshit Bara, and that the letters of the Aleph base are really, and both as the language as a sacred language that in the Aleph you know how to unpack. It's like a Russian doll. Onion rings, you unpack. In the Aleph is the base, and the base all the way to Tuf. So it's all contained, going up and down, and therefore also, for example, the whole Torah is included in the Aleph of Anochi. I think that's the way Saadia Gaon says, and I think based on that, the Baal Shem Tov uses that also for Bereshit Bara for Genesis too. I think there's another couple ones besides that. So the Baal Shem Tov, was not your, certainly even those academics who did sort of concede that most likely the Baal Shem Tov did exist. We're talking about in the 1800s, early 1900s. So admitted all the way by now. Sorry, there's noise out there. But yeah, by now, as mentioned before, after Moshe Rosman published the ledger, everyone had to admit that he existed. But even so, people were saying, yeah, he was just a semi-ignoramus and what have you. But just based on everything we know here and there, based on all different sources, seems not. You want to, like, just based on the evidence that we do have, you want to debate how learned, how much of a scholar he was. We could debate that. Was he as great in halacha and knowing shots backwards, forwards, like the Nedav Yehuda or the Pnei Yeshua? Maybe it was the Pnei Yeshua that he was related to. Also, or other, maybe not practically the way we understand, but Shem Tov certainly knew the Tanakh well. He knew Mishnah and Gemara, especially the Agadita parts and basic and even the learned parts here and there well. It's quoted in its theories, even when the teachings are not in the Nigla way, in the way that we standardly associate understanding, like the yeshiva way of learning, and it's more like making a Chassidish Torah out of it. But he still knows, understands what he's saying there when he reads on this Gemara, that Gemara, you know. And yeah, and also those what seems like most authoritative texts of the Baal Shem Tov that we do have show in his style that he's writing like that, like the way of, let's say, knowing, let's say, certain malitzas, we say certain like borrowed phrases from Tanakh or Gemara or Medrash that he puts in his letters, and his grammar is correct. He's a learner. Moreover, they found that there is even in a sefer, a book that has amongst the Haskamas. I forget if it's a book more of halacha stuff or if it's a book of more like Jewish stuff. But there's an actual Haskama, and it's almost certainly it is, and it says there be so about Ben Elazar about the children. Seems like almost certainly it is the Baal Shem Tov. So he was even being recognized in his life as being prominent enough to be included in a non-Hasidic sefer, as giving his approbation. So we could take that. Baal Shem Tov's, his great chiddush was that despite his greatness in learning and deep spiritual sensitivity and natural talent, you want to call it spiritual natural talent, despite all that, he still recognized and focused on those elements of the pashutty, the simplicity, that which is not just all Talmudic and analytic and certainly ways of that the Jewish community leadership establishment was in his day, which was there was still what was known as the Bad Arba Haratzot, Council of the Four Lands, which were how to deal community like a pan-Jewish government in a way throughout Europe. And they would be like the conduit and representation of the host government with various Jewish affairs, and the way politics and people of power go. It trickled down that the people, especially the lower strata, quote unquote lower strata, were living dismal lives physically, spiritually, what have you. Especially coming after the debacle of the Khmelnytsky massacres, 1648, right? and on, and also 2 decades thereafter, the debacle of the Sabbatian movement, which still continued on in different forms or what have you for decades on, and is its own story, which is not for now. And so the Baal Shem Tov was born in 1698, coming for at the dawn of the right, the 18th century, starting, and he was born like on the edge of the I suppose with the Russian empires, that part, but which only not long before Baal Shem Tov was born was part of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans just retreated from that area, not just a couple of decades, I think, before Baal Shem Tov was born in Tulsin. Where was it? Does anyone remember? All right. I'm sorry, I'm not polished up on the history part. Though interesting, in the Shifchei Baal Shem Tov, which is its own discussion. By the way, are people fine if we continue talking about the Baal Shem Tov more in these historical things, or people want to go on to other stuff?
Absolutely.
Yeah, what? Yeah, the historical stuff is good. Okay, and
Yeah.
also we'll bring out more deeper stuff through it too. Okay, so the Shifchei Baal Shem Tov, which again is, even the academics view it as the most authoritative, if not that everything is 100% historically accurate or can be proven, but certainly it is the closest authoritative record of at least how the generation right after the Baal Shem Tov viewed the Baal Shem Tov and transmitted the stories, gave over the stories that they witnessed of the Baal Shem Tov to the next generations. So again, the composition of the Shivchei Baal Shem Tov, which translates as the in praise or the praises of the Baal Shem Tov. This version even has vowels in Hebrew. Was originally printed in, if I recall, around 1812, 1813. I'm sorry, maybe I think, yeah, like the early mid 18 teens, 1813. Interesting, right after the Napoleonic War, it seems like, in the town of Kapust, which had its own Jewish printing press, which actually was a Hasidic printing press, run by, I think his name was Yisrael Yaffa, who was a Hasidic, not only just a Chassid, he was a Chassid of the Alter Rebbe, of Al Tanya. So that's okay. So here tonight we're going to find different direct connections to Baal Shem Tov and Alter Rebbe, including this. So the Shivchei Baal Shem Tov was printed in let's say 1814, right? Baal Shem Tov passed away when? 1860, right? He was born 1698, passed away 1860. So that means that the Shivchei Baal Shem Tov was published more than 50 years after the Baal Shem Tov. If so, why do we say it's the most that it has this credibility and provenance, as they like saying? So the answer is that Shivchei Baal Shem Tov is really a final collection and editing or amalgamation of a compilation of stories which were beginning to be collected in the first decade and two right after the Baal Shem Tov's passing, and it was and then there was added. So there was a core of it, which was written by, if I recall, the son-in-law of the Baal Shem Tov's scribe, one of his scribes, label or something. Maybe related also to what's his name? Gedalia. Linitz, Gedalia of Linitz. I think there's a connection also. Gedalia of Linitz was a very fascinating character. He was also a student of the Baal Shem Tov, and he has his own amazing svarim, and with also some sayings, I think, from the Baal Shem Tov. I just can't remember offhand what the name of the Sefer Gedalia Lin is. I think he was also related, connected to to certain texts of the Maggid too. Be it as it may, I hope sometimes you remember things once you don't think about it too much. Divrei Yeshalevov maybe is the name of the sefer, maybe not. Maybe that's from another student. Anyway, so it was collected from the 1760s, 1770s, and then by the 1790s it was something that was already enough for the collection. But then it went to another decade or two editing. Then Yisrael Yafa, who had a manuscript copy of it, decided to publish it. Now, before he published it, because they're primarily the main the Shifrei HaBesht, as it was pre-publication, was all various stories of the Baal Shem Tov. Now, true, there were stories there about the early time of the Baal Shem Tov, the early miracles of the Baal Shem Tov, right before he was recognized by everyone. And a lot of them do appear at the beginning of it, of the Shifrei HaBesht. However, it did not give enough of a backstory of the Baal Shem Tov. Who were his parents? How was he born? How did he grow up? What did he do when he was still in the years of occultation, if you want to call it, when he was still a Nistar? All that stuff. So, what happened was that this Rabbi Yafa had, or I don't, it's not, see, this is the way he writes in Prince, that he heard from the Alter Rebbe, Baal Tanya himself, all the stories about the Baal Shem Tov, how he was born and where he came from and all this stuff. And Yafa wrote them down and printed it at the beginning of the Shifrei Baal Shem Tov. So, the Shifrei Baal Shem Tov that we have now is the first quarter or so, at least, I think, or a good chunk of the beginning part is actually coming from the Baal Tanya, from the Alter Rebbe himself. Not everyone knows this. And if you know how to read, you could see at which point it shifts to the actual Shifrei. I think it's even demarcated. Let me see. Right. So the very beginning is, here, I'll read to you. He says, Amar Hamatfis, the publisher says, since I saw in the Shifrei Baal Shem Tov that stuff are not in chronological order, and in B'Shem Admor Harav Nishmas Begin, in the name of the Rebbe, the Rav, that he means Alter Rebbe. Shamati Hakol B'Seder Nachem Novei. I heard it all in proper order and with good explanation. Lachein Atfis Kasher Shamu Mipiva Kodesh. Therefore, I will publish now the way I heard it from his holy mouth. And then I'll go on to the rest. So, chapter 1 is all about his father Eliezer. Very trippy story. I mean, I could read and go through, but then we're gonna go the whole night here, at least, essentially. But there's a whole backstory of how he wound up in the palace of a king in a foreign land and was tempted and overcame. And that's for that reason he was blessed to have a child even at old age, and that was Baal Shem Tov. And then how he was born, and how the story. The story when the Baal Shem Tov was the Malamed assistant, and he would take the kids through the passageway, the woods, to go to the cheder, and a great sorcerer came and embodied himself into the form of a drum roll, a werewolf. It actually says it. Let me see. And in fact, I saw that when this was printed in Hebrew, within a year, a Yiddish version came out. In fact, I think that it could be maybe the Yiddish even came out before. Be it as it may, I've seen from then, from the early 18 teens, the copy where it says the word for werewolf in Yiddish. I just forget it now. See, here it says l'chaya ra'a, but that's not that. That's not the way it's in the original, as far as I remember. It says clearly werewolf. And that this is the first heroism of the Baal Shem Tov, how he tells he fears not because he remembers his father's teaching when because he was an orphan to the Baal Shem Tov, and thank God that his father told him before he passed away is not to fear anyone or anything but Hashem. So this was his first practice there. He had his his stick, and it says I'll read to you this part. Because again, the children's tehillim and prayers were really disturbing the Satan above, and he really had to stop it. So he came in cahoots with the sorcerer to do this, to scare them away with the werewolf. And again, when he heard his father, remembers his father's words not to fear anyone but Hashem. So Baal Shem Tov, because none of the parents wanted to give their kids to go into to go to Cheder anymore. So Baal Shem Tov went back, convinced the parents, that he should give back his children. Because he's going to take care of this werewolf. And they were convinced, they agreed. He took in his hand a good strong stick. And when he was going like any other day that went through the pathway, and they were singing the davening of this tillim of the song so sweetly. This werewolf jumped on them. Baal Shem Tov ran to it. Hit it, struck it on its forehead, and it died. And then they went off. So then the next day when they came back, instead of seeing an animal carcass, they saw it like transmigrate, like it was the magic. It was really the magician who was the werewolf, embodied, who did his magic spell to be a werewolf. So once he was killed, he turned back to a dead wizard or magician. And then it goes on other stories. All right, so that's the type of story that you have here. There's also the great narrative story about the first spiritual teacher of the Baal Shem Tov, known as Rebbe Adam, who some associate with Rebbe Adam Baal Shem, who's another known legendary Baal Shem before the actual Baal Shem Tov. There's also those that say his teacher was also known as Chaya Achia Hashiloni, right? Who was at the times of Eliyahu, or around times of Navi. Also, even higher than that, it's also known as Chaya Yechida. Like Kabbalistically, Achia Shaloni has other name is Chaya Yechida, meaning the two most lofty levels of the soul. Meaning that implying that Baal Shem Tov was learning not just from any teacher, master, but mamash, from the very source. And then there are other stories here. So and how he lived alone in villages with just a bunch of like really common people, farmers, even bandits, and how he became like the arbiter, the judge from all these bandits and these common people, and then how they all respected him, and how the bandits wanted to show him the special secret passageway, how to get to Israel. And there was a whole Lord of the Rings, different path things, including going over a big pit with a plank over like a fiery pit, and he turns back, and why? and how he counters a giant frog on the way. He's talking, who used to be a Talmud Chacham. Okay, I'm going to connect this because hopefully we're going to say another story at some point about Hashem. Connect. It's that the Talmud Chacham that you know the story about the frog? I may have mentioned it, but it was maybe a couple of years ago. So, and it's in the Shikha Baal Shem Tov, and I think it's in the Alter Rebbe part, in fact, that during this long voyage, when he was attempting to go find the secret shortcut to Israel, so you would think if the Baal Shem Tov could do Kvitzat Derech, the really warp speed travel that he could, especially Motzoei Shabbat, why couldn't he do it then? So it seems like maybe, I don't know, this is my own personal hypothesis. It seems like he only got the powers of Kvitzat Derech when he actually started revealing himself at the age of 36, right? Because even in his 20s, he didn't reveal himself right away. Wait, I'm sorry. Wait, hang on. So, yeah, I'm sorry. Just something was happening there, technical. Yeah. So let's say he was still developing, meaning finding himself and learning with the Rabban Hashem. Sounds like started even in his teens into his 20s. By age 26, he went to hiding, so to speak, living amongst, faraway place, a hamlet, as they used to call it, and all that. And he was there alone, and he was also a shochet. We know their stories of shochet, amongst other things. And there he was studying, including there was this great manuscript that's so super fun. He was learning with Rabban Hashem. And I think one version, it was hidden under a rock, and you go back to learn with Rabban Hashem, a special manuscript. I think he still had it later when he went to the village also. Some Gershon Shalom has a paper, and he says that the manuscript that in Shifcha Baal Shem Tov says that he was learning, the Baal Shem could be a referential type of story, not exactly historically accurate, but could be, it's referencing that manuscript, Kabbalist Sefer Tzorah, that Kabbalist book by Reb Hershel Tzorah. Also, they have the stories how he married his wife, and his wife came from a so-called higher, more prominent family. His brother was prominent, Talmud Chacham, who in fact made Aliyah to Israel during when the Baal Shem Tov was alive. It seems like in like the 1730s or 40s. And I'm mentioning it because it's leading to something here. And all beginning with the Nigun, we started from the beach on Santa Monica, wherever they were. So in the development of Rosh Hashanah, and he reveals himself. I mean, he only made the Mezhebush later. I forget exactly how many years before his passing. In fact, there's been a lot of research done on the Rosh Hashanah. Even more recently, there's a great academic of Israel, Moshe Idel, was involved. There was a big book on the Baal Shem Tov, came out maybe like 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago, which was the culmination of the whole Baal Shem Tov project done, I think also with the University of Leipzig of East Germany, and also with people who went through like Polish archives and other sources of information, also to get a lot of like historical contextual stuff about other forms of mystics and what have you, or medicine people, of the region where he grew up, or where Hashem grew up or lived. So Baal Shem Tov is very interesting because again, contemporaneously there is very little, yet there's been so much discussed and analyzed. For example, with the Shivcha Baal Shem Tov, there's been over 100 years of scholarship just on that. There's also right. There's also the site, his grave site, Shul, David Meshbush, which existed till basically the Nazis, and they have rebuilt it of mamish in full replica. So it's almost like you're in the real one. So some it's real. It's tangible. Now there's a whole corpus of materials attributed to the Baal Shem Tov, which is actually in the Chabad library, called the Cherson Geniza, which is a collection of letters attributed to the Baal Shem Tov, the Magi, the Baal Tanya, and others. They told us, yes, but others of that circle, or Hasidic masters. However, academics, practically all academics, even from academics, and I would say even a bunch of non-academics, do not view it as authentic. It was quote unquote revealed, came to the possession of Hasidim, specifically Lubavitch Hasid and the fifth Chabad Rebbe, as at the end of World War I time, right after World War I, towards that, like 1919, 20, what have you, earlier, like 1917 and 1920. But already by the early 20s, there were already things published with knowing the name of the forger, what have you. But some people, a lot of people, there are a bunch that say in Lubavitch, they would claim, even if it's not exactly, not all the letters are exactly the very exact, or that there are certain inaccuracies, but that they are authentic teachings or general, or even maybe sloppy copies, but not forged all the way through. This is its own subject of research about the Cherson Geniza, but just saying that find to like really test, to have the parameter. This is what my friend Eli Moseson was setting up. He was creating a bit of a system of how we can validate what is true about Baal Shem Tov here and there, and both teachings, historical elements, what have you, right? So it's not so easy, and of course there are more very strict, let's call it, academics, that anything that we questions they won't accept. Others will take more circumstantial enough evidence, or plethora thereof would be enough of proof. In fact, Eli's PhD went through a bunch of the different manuscripts and early print sources, see how we can categorize them using certain criteria. Interesting. So this is all leading up to what we're going to say. We were singing before a Maseh Kasi Mar which is from the most known and some would say most authentic in a way teaching or letter or writing from the Baal Shem Tov himself. It's known as the Igeret Aliyat HaNeshama, the manuscript of Aliyat, of the ascent of the soul, and it is. I'm just remembered. If I recall, I haven't looked it up recently in a while. That he's writing in around, let's say, circa, just to translate the Hebrew year into the English year, or secular year, let's call it, the Gregorian calendar, is that it was like Okay, it was year 1746. He's writing about a letter that he wrote in 1745 that didn't reach the person about a vision he had in 1742. The vision he had in 1740, yeah, about a vision he had in 1742, Rosh Hashanah. And in that vision, he goes up and there's various parts to it. And I highly recommend whoever wants to, has the time to read it. It's so much so that there's 3 or 4 different versions. People have written entire treatises just on this one letter. And in the letter, the Baal Shem Tov finally makes it all the way up to the um, chamber of Mashiach and asks Mashiach, when are you coming? When are you going to reveal yourself on earth? And to which the Baal Shem Tov, Mashiach answers the Baal Shem Tov, when your well springs will spread out to the outside. And which is a paraphrase, I think, from Isaiah. And that is the way it's quoted and the way the song goes. But as someone did mention here, he does add another element, which is that he should teach the certain kavanas of how to daven, how to do certain, even Kabbalistically oriented theurgic practices for people, for students. So you could read it, that the Wellspring teachings, whatever teachings, but it included certainly even Kabbalistic affairs for more elitist meditators or people that could pursue and have the mental capacities to pursue like Kabbalistic kavanas. So, and one of the main differences of the Baal Shem Tovs, especially even on a Kabbalistic level, right? The Baal Shem Tov, you have Baal Shem Tov as leader of the people, you have Baal Shem Tov this and that, but there's also Baal Shem Tov as Kabbalist, because we even have tradition of various, not just practical Kabbalah from Baal Shem Tov as we spoke, but even more like Lurianic type of kavanas, having to do with let's say mikvah of Shabbat, Arab before Shabbat, or for vidui, for confession, or for certain things that happen to one's life, or certain parts of davening. And there's different versions of the mikvah because the Baal Shem Tov used the siddurs with the kavanas of Baal Shem Tov. That's the siddur that Baal Shem Tov in Chabad library, and includes another 1 or 2 that are, one is in another university and one in private hands. They're all 3 attributed, but the one in Chabad library seems was the most used, most authoritative. The second one of them is actually, it seems like wasn't even technically used by Baal Shem Tov, was being completed by a scribe for the Baal Shem Tov to use, but it's questionable if the Baal Shem Tov even used it. Which incidentally, in that siddur is where we have one of the contemporaneous proofs. I mean, the contemporaneous proof of exactly when the Baal Shem Tov passed away, because it was a question if it was the second day of Shavuot, the first day of Shavuot. Tradition in Chabad and some others it was in the first day of Shavuot. And in the colophon of this siddur, Shapsi Reshka, Kavanas, Baal Shem Tov, Arizal's, Baal Shem Tov, you could say version of the Arizal's Kavanas. Sometimes he veered away from Arizal entirely, certain things. There's a story or 2 about it. I don't know if I may have shared in the past. So so there was a in the Baal Shem Tov version of Kabbalah, he so firstly he would come up with his own formulas. Second of all, he also integrated psychology, how to make it personal, not just thinking different formulas and versions. Thirdly, you see also the prominence of of again of using mental powers. That's what kavana is, psyche, and how that could actually have effect on things, prayer, transformation, what he called being mamtik words to sweeten the negative energies. And in Shivchei Baal Shem Tov, there's even descriptions of how he would get into these states of intensity. And a lot of it sounds like he would like be standing, he would bend his knees forward and his body backwards, almost like some backwards yoga flip, if that makes sense. It's described, that's what it seems like, more than one place. And he certainly was embodied the channeling or mystical experience, or the dveikus, let's call it, when kavanas and all that. So he's very into that. But the chiddush, you could say, the Baal Shem Tov was that he simplified and downsized the Lurianic kavanas. In fact, I think if I recall, there's one or two sayings where he said that the Arizal made it too complicated, and you forget a bit of to focus on the prayer itself. And so, therefore, if you compare the Baal Shem Tov's kavanas, let's say the mikvah to the Arizal's, or in other areas, things, you'll see that Baal Shem Tov is drawing on Lurianic formulae and things, but using it in different ways, or more again, shortened and what have you. Like you don't have to, like if you look at the Siddur of the Rashash, you would see that you have to keep on turning back. It's like full, like the kavanas take over way more than the actual davening text. So that's too much of a distraction. So it seems like this, that again. So there, we're making certain, like, what do you call it, myths or fact things. So one of them is the issue of that Baal Shem Tov wasn't that. Firstly, he existed, of course, and that he was not learned, not true either. He was learned both in Talmudic study and in mysticism, and even philosophy. Right? We mentioned Sadigan. So, thirdly, that he was challenging supernatural aspects from an early age, and also again that he practiced certain forms of Kabbalah in his way, and also that he was a teacher, not just to the common people, which of course he spent time in the marketplace and all that, but it seems like he actually was once he was revealed, he was primarily for more elitists. It's both in again, scholars and mystics and what have you. People who were known as Ovdim, people that worked on themselves. And if like we've been doing here and there, when we have time, at times we'd even go through teachings of Baal Shem Tov on the Parsha, and you can even see there great ways that you could see he knew what he was talking about, right? So Mamish. So this is the night of Baal Shem Tov, and also again with Alter Rebbe, like we said, Shivchei Baal Shem Tov was published from them about. By the way, one last thing, just interesting about the Shivchei Baal Shem Tov, praise of Baal Shem Tov, as mentioned, it was published in 1814 or something like that. But as mentioned, it was starting to be already written and being in manuscript form, like think of like a collection, a journal, a collection of stories about someone you really admire or a leader, and then you start adding and expanding to it. So there was a manuscript found in like 1980 some bizarre story. Some mysterious dentist in Brooklyn, who some young Chabad student or Bacher came across, and who happened to have some contact who just came out of Russia, brought this out. No one knows 100%. It's not clear exactly the whole chain of events. And there was not that long ago, maybe a couple of years ago, an article, I think in Makar Rishon, which is like an Israeli journalist site online. I think you can find the story. But I remember generally here, basically 1980, the manuscript popped up. And through here and there, it wound up in the Rebbe's library. And this manuscript was, amongst other things, it had in it an early, no one had a manuscript version of Shir Baal Shem Tov even before the publication. But here was a manuscript that included like a good chunk of the Shir Baal Shem Tov, and they dated it through internal evidence of the manuscript to like the late 1770s. So that's just like with less than 2 decades after Baal Shem Tov. And already there was a whole enough of a collection of them, right? And there are some variations between the manuscript form and the printed form. The manuscript form has some more clearly less, let's call it censored, if you want to call it, form of, like, say, when right discussing it like about Shabbat Tzvi, there's a story or two, or what have you, right, and a couple other things. But it seems like a more accurate text, and it did resolve certain questions they had, certain of the students of Baal Shem Tov, the different events described. It's, as far as I know, it's still in the library on Eastern Parkway. So hi, so welcome, then Natu. I love it that we have some of the groupies here. Danny and
Hi,
Dana.
hi,
Right.
thank you.
Yeah. So we've been speaking about the Baal Shem Tov because it's his birthday. It was today, and we even celebrate the night thereafter. And I just remembered. Okay, so let me ask you like this. I'm just checking in with everyone. We could speak more about Baal Shem Tov. For example, we could look up and if you want, we could actually read this letter together. That's one thing we could do. Another thing that, in any ways, I think I was going to do maybe a little bit is, if you remember that French rock band, Baal Tshuva band, we played about the king in the field a couple weeks ago. So he has a song about that Baal Shem Tov. He was a holy man, such a holy man. And he said he saw the Messiah in a dream. It's when are you coming to here? Question. He answered, when your fountains of wisdom reach to the outside. He was a holy man. So, and if you want, we could play that. I think it's available on YouTube. And then also speak more about Chayil in ways, and also the Parsha, and also Malava Malka, actually. And what am I saying? Because there's a special connection of the Baal Shem Tov with Malava Malka. Okay? So speaking about Baal Shem Tov here is directly related to Malava, and we'll show how. In fact, there's an amazing story connected to it. And then we'll explain what we mean by that story, how the story is connected to Baal Shem Tov, Malka, and also to what we were speaking last week about Malava Malka related to the luz bone, right? It's funny that luz in Spanish means light, and in the way it is, the bone that brings back the light to the body, right? The luz bone, which, what did we say it's called, Jonathan, again? It's the
occipital bone.
Occipital bone, right. Thank you. So there's that point. And also, if, and hopefully we do, go into about Malava Malka tonight, it would also touch on the soul aspect of Motzei Shabbat and Malava Malka and Havdalah, because last week we were focusing on the body element, but there's also the soul quality of something that's happening, both with Shabbos and then leaving Shabbos. So, just giving you like a little bit of the menu ahead of, and also possibilities, and then of course things about the parsha and all that. So, do we want to go? Let me ask like this: do we want to look a bit at the letter of the Baal Shem Tov first, and then go into like Malava Malka stuff, or do you want to go straight into Malava Malka stuff, and then of course, either way, connect it with the parsha? Oh, one more thing, not to go into detail because now we're streaming out. Initially, when we were for tonight, in a way, I was not prepared. I told myself mentally that tonight will be a short night because for whatever reason, last night I had certain emergency situation, let's call it medical something with some other person, and I basically stayed up the bulk of the night dealing with that into today and running around. I didn't even like maybe get ready as much as you normal, but we have enough. And most saying I thought I was going to be maybe tired-ish and not maybe even end up finish maybe an hour earlier than normal. But I didn't think about it the last 2-3 hours, so maybe could go. But I do have things to do tomorrow also earlier also. Relatively. I'm just talking out loud, thinking out loud, as they say, just in a way to say that yeah, we could do whatever we want here, and whatever we don't cover tonight, we could do that. Okay. So Aaron says you'll be checking out 2 minutes, right? Because you're in a healthy cycle these days, Baruch Hashem. So you do your thing, anyways. Does anyone who wants to look at the Baal Shem Tov's letter first before we go and delve into Motzei Shabbat? Okay, Motzei, have a great one, Aaron. Great when you do join in. Sure. And so does anyone have preference? Do you want to see about how the Baal Shem Tov describes how he had his vision and his soul?
Yes, please.
Ascended that, and then
Yes,
we'll see how much
please.
we're going to, okay. Especially for those, for like myself included, like myself and maybe I don't know who else here, but like I grew up with this, I read it when younger and grew up with it. So to me, I just not that I assume that everyone saw it, but basically it's an honor for me to share this very special text with you. Okay. I just want to, Neshama. Just want to find a letter of it, the actual text. Okay, according to this, the ascent says of ascent of soul in 1746. But let's look at it. We'll look at it. So basically, he is writing to his brother-in-law, Rabbi Gershon Kittiver, who not that long earlier, a few years before, made Aliyah to Israel. That's why we have a copy of this letter, because this letter survived, was in Israel for years. And then it was printed in basically the first Hasidic book ever published, which is the Toldot Yaakov Yosef book, if I recall, maybe the second time, one of the very first in the early 1780s. Okay, so it's so that too was the earliest first published text of Baal Shem Tov, just like 20 some years after his passing. So that gives it also stronger authenticity. I'm just trying to find a link to the actual text, right? If not, I know we may have to just find it in. Okay, it's just like hopefully this is it. If not, okay. And again, there are different versions, and some has longer than other, and yeah. And in fact, my dear friend Ali Mosen, one of his main parts of his PhD was comparing the different version, the Karetz version, this version, that version, 4, 5, and finding a resolution of plausible original text. And again, it was it was like that's how important it was, like that's discussed by academics, that too, its authenticity or different versions, also over 100 years of scholarship on that. Okay, so I found the version, not the best type, but good enough for now. We're going to read some of it, okay? This is the way. This is from Ketzer Shem Tov, took it from the Toldot Yaakov Yosef. Or actually, it's the Ben Parat Yosef. Ben Parat Yosef, I think, was the second book of the Toldos after the Yaakov Toldot Yaakov Yosef. Then there was a third book called Safnat Paneah. Okay. He says this is the text of the Baal Shem Tov's letter. I don't think this is the most longest version, but it's good enough. Okay, so it is. He says openly that in 1746, Rosh Hashanah, he made hashbas is when you and swear, that would be the most literal country, meaning you take on a certain divination of rather a certain process where you and channel your soul to go up above your body into the spirit realm, into the quote unquote different heavens. So it's the hashba'at is because there's also certain. It seems like part of the process was like incantations. It's almost like invoking different names of God or different angel spirits, what have you. So there's certain hashba'at. It's like you're putting a certain way of making it happen through a certain ritualistic practice. Even. He says he did a certain ritual basically for the sense. Ascent of the soul, as you know, because he's telling his brother-in-law, who, even though, and this you'll find in Shivchei Baal Shem Tov too, even though originally he was one of the greatest antagonists of Baal Shem Tov, but then there was a certain story, which, if I recall, included saving Reb Gershon Kittever from drowning in the sea because of questioning him and all that, like some relate. Also was associated with a miracle that Reb Gershon Kittever realized that his brother-in-law is no ordinary person, and also Reb Gershon Kittever himself also came to believe in the Baal Shem Tov's miracle and Kabbalistic powers. And so the Ki Yadu Alacha, as you know here, is most probably the Baal Shem Tov already shared with Gershon Kittever. There are other times he had something similar, Aliyah to Neshama, right? There's another thing you find in the Shivchei Baal Shem Tov is that when the Baal Shem Tov needs to, he does not shy away of sharing his visions or the way his soul elevations and what have you. And even sometimes he says things that can sometimes come across as spiritual hubris, saying like course, like I'm great, I'm the greatest in whatever, and realizing this, and or that only I was able to save the village from a plague or something, right? Things like that. You know, Baal Shem Tov is a very interesting character. For example, even when he had, and we spoke about this Pesach time, when he had his fallen spirit, as it's known as, when he right, he lost all of his superpowers, so to speak, all of his knowledge. Even then, he wasn't depressed. He just like was almost like always mystified. He needed to experience a state of simplicity at times, and he was there. But it's like and he also very trusted his intuition. That's another feature of the Baal Shem Tov, so much. And I don't see you have much in a way that he doubts. And even if he does, it's not out of confusion. There's certain types of, I've seen this, let's say with Lubavitcher Rebbe, that he almost never, and that's a great feature of Lubavitcher Rebbe, that as far as I meant, one is that he was always a Rebbe thing. One of the main qualities of that makes the Rebbe is a certain clarity and assertiveness, not being wishy-washy, being clear of one's choices and acting and living by it, sticking by it also most of the time, what have you. So someone like the Lubavitcher Rebbe, remember, he was very clear and very decisive. That's the word. His critics would say he was too stubborn, but even when he did have something called like a suffix or to truthfully, it was coming out of very deep intelligence and understanding of situations, and it was almost it was a necessary suffix to clarify, but it wasn't like he was doubting that, the ability to make a certain decision. Sometimes, in rare cases, he changed his position in certain things. It seemed like for example, pursuing the who is a Jew issue in Israel, Mir Yehudi, which the Rebbe was crusading from the early 70s, but by the mid-late 80s, he quietly stopped focusing on it. There was a certain recognition. For whatever reason, things weren't. And but by and large, there was a clarity and steadfastness, and that similar quality you see with the Baal Shem Tov. That the Baal Shem Tov had. He's referenced saying he had Aliyat and Neshama, ascent of the soul, Rosh Hashanah 1746, and implying that he already had it in the past. And then he's sharing it with his brother-in-law, Gershon Kittifer, means that he's clear. He's not doubting. He had a mystical or spirit experience, vision, and to him it's true. True, like being like the letter he's writing in whatever day it was is reality. And so the Baal Shem Tov continues. And I saw amazing stuff in a vision, which I have never seen until now, from the day that I had consciousness or became intelligent, or stood up, maybe he was a thinking person. And here I think is also another implication that he already shared with Gershon Kittifer, that he already had visions before, just this one was the greatest one he ever had. And that which I saw and learned or experienced, Baal Shem Tov telling his brother-in-law, when I went up there, meaning up to heaven with Aliyas and Neshama, it's impossible for me to communicate, transmit, even face to face. And some people have have certain experiences, especially in certain types of ceremonies all night, and then people are so have reached such a level that they say openly that they cannot even articulate in words and give over, communicate what they experienced. That's how great it was. So the Baal Shem Tov continues about this vision. But when I returned to the lower Gan Eden, meaning that which got so high where he reached this time, this Aliyah, was not just to the lower Gan Eden, but it was to the upper Gan Eden, Gan Eden HaElyon. So something amazing happened up there. And what really happened there, he can't even describe. But when he, on his way back down, he's mentioning on his way back down before he even began talking about going way back up, because he just wanted to compare. He says, on my way back down of myself into the lower Gan Eden, very easy common neshamis achayim v'amesim, and I saw that various living and deceased souls. How you doing, Lee? You doing me? Some that were familiar to me, I knew who they were, and some I didn't know who they were. The Li Shir Umispar. I saw there were innumerable amounts of these souls. They were all like going up and down, like all like twittering, flowing, like motion, in motion, and going up and down. To go from one world or dimension to the other through the known column. That's those that know Chen, Staris, meaning those that know Kabbalah. And this is an obvious reference to what the Zohar talks about it, for example, that there's the column between the Gan Eden and different levels of Gan Eden, and also between the Hichalas, chambers, 7 chambers too. It seems also there's a bit of, even there's one that you could go slide all the way up or down, not even go, because a column is greater than a ladder, because if you have, that's the difference of the firemen will tell you, you climb up the ladder to go, but you slide down the pole, right? That's the way it goes. But in this case, there's a way to even slide up the pole, okay, to go all the way up. Ooh, as known. So there's it's known as the Amuda de Nahira, the column of fire, of flame, and it's related also to the Nahar Dinar, the river of fire that's mentioned in Daniel chapter 7 that I think we looked at quite a while ago. So this central middle column is a way. It's brought down in the Zohar and other Kabbalah is a way for the different neshamas to ascend, to go up, but they also, it says they have to go through the mikvah of the rivers. So there is the column going up, but they also have to. There's a cleansing process in the neshamas. Let's say if the lowest is Gehenna, and they want to go to the highest levels of Gan Eden, this is the way neshamas go up with the column, and the column is going through these fiery mikvahs to purify them even more. Sometimes it says they go up and then they drop down into Nadinar, and then they're purified to go even higher. It's like a little bit, that's the Ratzi and Shab. But with each Ratzi and Shab up and down, they're still making progress going up. Understood? So the Baal Shem Tov is saying that at some point, he made the Aliyah to the uppermost Gan Eden, sounds like, but now he started coming landing, so to speak. He makes it to the lower. By the way, I don't feel too guilty going through this before we delve into Abdal and Malka stuff, or even the Parsha, because this says this was for Rosh Hashanah happened, meaning, and we're mamish right before Rosh Hashanah time, so it's very appropriate we're looking at this. Even though there isn't any real discussion about Rosh Hashanah itself, but you'll see there's certain things that Rosh Hashanah is expressed here. For example, we know Rosh Hashanah is the time that we know it's like this from scientific, it's about the time of judgment, when practically things are going to happen to one's life, to one's community, neighborhood, land. It could be plagues, it could be death, it could be great amazing joys and simchas and what have you. So as you'll see later, hopefully. Okay, we'll go on. So he says, excuse me, needs a second. Good. They say Gesundheit was the life force. People used to pass away when they sneezed. If you sneezed, that was the end of your life. That was the way, I think, till Yaakov, if you know, I think it says, right? So that's why we say Gesundheit, the soul. So that's another thing, the soul and the body. It's also another theme for tonight. Here, the Aliyah and the Neshama, maybe about that was part of it, sneezing, I don't know. Anyways, so all the souls, and now he's the lower level of Ganem, but even there, it's a packed house of souls floating up and down and things. You understand what's going on? This is the lower level. You're seeing all this. Okay. And how are these neshamas? They are the Simcha Rabbi Gedela. They're an extreme, pure, sheer joy. Great joy. Asher Yola Sata, that the mouth cannot even attempt to describe. The covered Eizin Gagash Mishmaya, and the physical ear cannot, it would be too heavy, too hard for the physical human ear to even receive it, to hear it. If he's saying, I can't even describe it. I could just describe to you what was happening there, but I can't describe really what was happening there. Just that there was that. The Gam Rishayim, what he witnessed there in Gan Eden is that Rishayim Rabim Chazru B'tshuva B'nibn Cholahen Avenei Sehem, that many of these souls were doing tshuva in this process of the going up and downs, and their souls were their sins were being forgiven in this whole process. This was mamish, this was the tshuva process going on this level too. If I recall, when we were learning from the Zohar, another places about the 7 chambers, Eichalas above, which correlates with the Gan Eden chambers, there was a specific chamber that had to do with Balchuvas. I think it was something like the 3rd or 4th, like one of the lower ones. In that case, it would be something like a name. Okay. So now the Baal Shem Tov is continuing to write again in first person. This is a private letter to his brother-in-law. And it seems like one of the reasons we do even have a copy was, again, either because the copy made to Israel, or also that a copy was lost, so he had to write another one, and then they found the other one, or something to that effect. So this is as authentic as it gets, written in the Baal Shem Tov's own language. And, okay, so he goes. Pasha Shahaya Ace, here we're on the 4th line. Pasha Shahaya Ace Ratzin Gadol. And for this time, when he went up this Rosh Hashanah, 1746, it was a great Eis Ratzin time of ultimate, that things could happen greatly if you just know how to ask for it or get it. He's saying it was an Eis Ratzin, meaning it was a special time for people to do tshuva. That's why all these souls were doing tshuva. So much so that Baal Shem Tov is saying, I myself was surprised how many were being accepted. Their tshuva was being accepted. So even more so great when we're learning it now in Elul. Shigam, and it continues. Shigam ati yadaita esim. He's saying, amongst these Baal Tshuvas were certain people that you, dear brother-in-law, knew them personally or knew of them. And they were also amongst them. Also, they were in great joy. By the way, this is another proof of the great Hasidic approach of tshuva, which is, yes, to be serious about it and even to cry in that, but ultimately it's about the joy of doing tshuva. It's in fact even a teaching, and it has to do even with our parsha. In our parsha, the parsha where it says that all the curses that happen in the parsha, which happens this week, which is even more than the chukaisai, because it transforms to the positive and all that. But it says, it says in the end, why all these negative things happen? Because we didn't serve Hashem with joy and a glad heart. And it's a great, I forget who was the Rebbe. I don't think it was a Kutsk. It could be, because the Vart itself is so non-Kutsk. But whichever the Rebbe was, said, there's one mitzvah. There's one thing in the Torah that's not a mitzvah, but without it, you cannot keep any of the mitzvahs. And that is this pasuk. to do everything we do b'simcha. Okay, including that the chiddush is okay. You want to put on tefillin, you want to shake the lulav and esrog simcha. I see it. But tshuva, what do you mean? What joy? Adra doesn't tshuva mean you need charata? You need, you have regret and really work on oneself and confront one's even darker sides and things that can even be painful, and one, even as courageous as it is to work to make that change. But it's heavy stuff. It's heavy stuff. Where's the joy here, right? But no. Well, firstly, the very fact that we can change is in itself a great, amazing thing. And itself is a reason to be both grateful and joyful. Secondly, the way, like the deepest, best way of tshuva is that we could start seeing even the positive and even in those things, even the things we regrettably do or what have you. Even the things we're trying to get away from. That even that, there was something positive that came out of that experience, even the most negative one. And that in itself is a way that could enhance and learn from it. And as someone says, right, to learn from our errors and have no regrets. We should have regrets, but in a way not regrets because by overcoming them, by these errors, mistakes we make, we become better yet. So it's mamash. So that's up to be simple. And here we see taka. That's why that's so stereotypical. The difference of like Chassidish or non-Chassidish Elul, or Chassidish or non-Chassidish Yom Kippur. All these things are tshuva. Even within Chassidus, very generally, you could see it as the difference between tshuva tata, the lower tshuva, or tshuva ilah, the upper tshuva. That the lower tshuva tata, is more about having the regret and getting away from the bad stuff, but it's still all the negativity is still an issue that you're working through. The higher level, more superior tshuva it's all about just becoming more pure and getting more to that light and the pure source, and just become more less animal, more angelic, right? That elevating ourselves. That's too here, in a way, you could say that when Baal Shem Tov is speaking about the ascent of the soul, Aliyas Neshama, he's not just talking about his own personal mystical high experience, and even how real it was for him. Hey, Menachem Mendy, great to see you. You're just coming into, we're in the middle of discussing the Baal Shem Tov's Aliyas Neshama, right? So Aliyah in this case also is related to that upper level, higher level of tshuva, which means mamish to elevate ourselves. This explains also why even a tzaddik can do tshuva. If tshuva is about correcting an aveira, let's call it for what it is. So if a tzaddik doesn't do aveiras, so then why is there a need to elevate? Like, what's going on? Where's the tshuva? So there's different answers. Of course, there's the answer that there's even a tzaddik on his level, her level also has his type of aveira which for us could even be considered a mitzvah. Right? And the different teachings, that's how they explain things with Moshe Rabbeinu when he didn't, seems like, certain things that Hashem told him to do, and seems like he didn't follow it all the way through and exactly the way Hashem wanted, which really it's explained. He was doing certain right things, but just for Moshe Rabbeinu, he should have been on a higher standard, what have you. So this is all like how superior we are. There's also the verse that Ein Tzadik Ba'aretz Asher Lo Yachta, that there is no right, even tzaddik that does not sin on ultimately in some level. Nobody's perfect, even a tzaddik in a way, even a tzaddik with Toiv possibly, like the highest level of tzaddik. But even so, even if we want to say the tzaddik is perfect, mamish, 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 still, teshuva means not like the Latin word of penance, of regretting and breaking, all that, but simply to return. From the word tashuv, as it says tashuv hey, to return, and that in itself. So the tzaddik too, with the aliyah of ascent of the tzaddik soul, that in itself is returning to the source, becoming more pure, becoming greater. So the Baal Shem Tov's, so ironically, even more so, there's a tshuva process. Maybe there's a subtext here. Baal Shem Tov is making doing tshuva of his soul, so to speak, on his level, and thereby encountering people who are doing of lower levels than Baal Shem Tov, who did real sins that are doing the tshuva on their level, and that it's all connected with this motion of the soul of ascent, or in the case also Ratzon and Shov, as I mentioned, and that is the tshuva process. Okay, and again that they were just full of joy doing this tshuva. But Olu Gamkin Baliyas and they also went up with these aliyot, with these ascents. And I'm just something here. That means that these souls, that Balchuva souls, returning souls, also reached higher states than we were before through the tshuva process. And they all these Balchuva souls, and maybe the other souls too, requested from me, Baal Shem Tov, Tsiru, the Hirtzubi, and they were like demanding from me, really begging from me, basically, ad bush, till like to the extreme supplication, Ba'amram, to say, Ba'amram, saying the following, quote, L'rum malis kvaiterascha, chanancha Hashem bebina yiseira l'hasik l'das minyanim eila. You, dear sir, honored, great honor of Torah, of your Torah. So again, in this letter, Baal Shem Tov is writing of himself that he's being referred to in lower Gan Eden by souls as someone who is of Torah stature, not just the great mystic holy tzaddik, but of Torah knowledge too. Again, a proof of that. That Hashem bequeathed you, graced you with exceedingly great insight, wisdom, understanding of things, and to understand various areas or subjects, different stuff. So therefore, Imanutala liislanu le'ezer v'sad. Please rise with us to be for us a guardian or a chaperone. Again, we find, as you mentioned, let's say that certain times the Baal Shem Tov was asked to come along to help people. We know even in non-Jewish literature, there's like the Dante's Inferno, there's Virgil and other, there are different guides or angelic guides, angel Gabriel sometimes, in different stories, guides people going up. We've read this when Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel went up in the Hechalot, in the chambers. They also had different angel guides and such. So here they're saying, Baal Shem Tov, who else is better than you? You're the best guy for you to come and come along with us to make sure that we're ascending and everything's good, cleared, and everything's working out smoothly. So now that's what they asked the Baal Shem Tov to go up with them. So now the Baal Shem Tov continues, because of the great sheer joy that I saw amongst them, I said to rise with them. I told myself, yeah, I'm going to go up with them. And then, in the brackets here is what was, I think, added by a more full version or another version. And so the Baal Shem Tov continues, And I saw in this vision, I suppose, when he wanted to go up with these souls, that the other side, the other power, that's the dark side, the shadow side, ascended, went up to try to stop and disturb this great sheer joy that there was never such a joy before. And he wanted to mamish cut off. There was, like we were reading before, the story with the kids and the werewolf, that also here, from Shivcha Baal Shem Tov, that here too, like the Samach Mem, we also call it, or sometimes in the Shivcha Baal Shem Tov, so he even calls it openly the Satan, or Sitra Achra, like here, tries to stop the great powers of the Baal Shem Tov himself, or from others that Baal Shem Tov. So Baal Shem Tov is almost like a shtickle, not to be too crass, crude, like a spiritual holy Superman. Like when the people even can try to do so, there are certain obstacles. He comes to help and save and block from the great villain that's holding back, trying to stop the peace, or the great fun, joy in the amusement park, right? Whatever it is. So upal al pi upulaisa gzeirishman. So what did the Samachman, the Satan, do to try to stop all this great joy that was bringing that could lead to great positive things that could happen to the Jewish community down here, especially being Rosh Hashanah for that year? Whatever happens, Rosh Hashanah, that establishes the whole year, right? When it gets close to Rosh Hashanah, we'll talk about how that happens, the contradiction of how can we say that everything's decided Rosh Hashanah, then other places it says it's decided every day of the year, not just the beginning. So obviously the general begins the beginning, then it's parceled out for every day of the year. That's one way to look at it. Be it as it may, what this letter, he's describing his Aliyat and Neshama honor. There's a reason why things that are happening very serious, very existential, and very very threatening, even on Rosh Hashanah, because of this day, because it's happening on Rosh Hashanah, which decides so much for the future, for that spirit, right? So this other side, the negative power, activated different gezeret shmad, that there was to be certain decrees of Jews that would be forced or threatened to convert or be killed, or be whatever they were going to do. Yeah, he says to be killed in all different terrible ways, and which the Jews would not convert to, and therefore would be killed in this way. So this all the Satan was arranging to be the counterforce, all this joy, so it will bring great sorrow to the Jewish community and to these souls too, and stop all the joy above. So now the Baal Shem Tov realizes what's going on with the other side. So I requested from my teacher, my master teacher, should go with me. So who is this master teacher he's referring to? Who knows? Hint, we spoke about it before, like an hour and a half ago. Anyone? So the answer is, this rabbi and teacher is Achia Hashiloni, aka Chaya Yechida, that we mentioned before. The spirit teacher, the teacher in flesh, according to Shivcha Baal Shem Tov, was Rabbi Adam Hashem, possibly. Even though Gershon Shalom doesn't fully agree with that, but be it as it may. But on a soul level, for sure, we know it was the great prophet Achia Shiloni, and even higher, the soul state thereof. So we're talking about really high level of what they would call in other sources astral level soul, right? And teacher, the Baal Shem Tov. So I asked my teacher, should I venture to go that high up with these souls, both for myself personally and especially with these less refined souls that have not gotten that high yet? It's a great danger to make these ascents to such high dimensions above God, the lower Gan Eden. Because since I came into existence, it says I did not myself even reach high. I did make it higher, maybe even higher than lower Gan Eden, but not as high in the highest levels of the upper Gan Eden. So he's saying it was both a sakana for me and for them. So basically, he goes on, and if I recall, there's more material in between than this version doesn't have. Be it as it may, he continues. Now he's going alone. Okay, basically he's going alone at this point. He says, I went up one level after other of stages of paradise, of Garden of Eden. Until I entered the chamber of Mashiach. Is here, this is the second paragraph. Where there Mashiach is learning Torah with all the great sages of the Talmud and righteous, and also with the 7 shepherds. Right, the 7 shepherds include even the 3 patriarchs, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Shlomo, etc. And there too, I saw great, humongous joy in the chamber of Mashiach with the great patriarchs and greatest righteous ones. And I knew they were also happy, but I still couldn't figure out why are they so happy. And I thought, maybe I actually passed away. Maybe my soul just left my body permanently. I've already made it into paradise. And I went straight to the highest level. And it's just like bliss of soul after passing away. And they're all happy that I am now here, have returned to the source, like I was before born into a body, Baal Shem Tov is saying. So maybe that's why they're happy. That's like the welcoming home of my soul after living in this world. Ideally, no, but then no. Why? Because ideally, but then they told me that the tzaddikim in the chamber of Mashiach told him, no, Baal Shem Tov, you didn't pass away, Dad. You're really still alive in a body. You're just having a aliyat neshama, ascent of the soul. Why did you not pass away from your body? Because they have great delight, pleasure, joy above when I am here in this world, physical world, and doing the physical embodied and physical practices of mitzvah and prayer and studying and what have you, and doing it with all the great unifications, meaning either through being conscious through the study, just by doing it, creating these great unifications, as spoken about so much in Kabbalah, especially the Rianic, the Arizal Kabbalah, making the unifications, because everything we do and pray and say and Torah and everything is creating unifications of different formulas of God's names and different letters of the alphabet and energies and so on and so forth. So he says, because he says that moreover, that he's saying that these great sages above of the Talmud and the Chumash and all that, and even Moshe, they're having great joy from when I am engrossed in learning their Torah down here in the world. So they don't want me to come up there. They're getting more delight of me learning down here in the world and then hearing it up there than me even being there in their presence, quote unquote, physically. Let's say soul physically, right? Okay. But still, so it's not because I passed away, Hashem said. So still, it was befuddled. Hashem says, I never figured it out why they were so happy, but that was the fact. They were so happy in me. So he continues. V'sha'alti es pi Mashiach. So I asked Mashiach, Eimas asi mar. When are you served? This is the song we were singing from A Masakatzimar. When are you coming down to earth, dear Rabbi Mashiach? The Heship Li, and here's the famous act. So Mashiach replied to me, this is how you Baal Shem Tov will know when Mashiach is arriving. When your teachings will be publicized, the Yiskala Ba'ilam, and will be revealed in the world, the Afutsu Mainesecha Chutza, and your fountains will spread forth out to the outside. Mashalamadati Oischa, from the teachings that I taught you, Mashiach said. So apparently Mashiach already, there was some encounter, or somehow Mashiach already taught Baal Shem Tov some teaching. Not saying that I'm teaching, I will teach you. It says I taught you. So Baal Shem Tov was already a carrier of messianic teachings. So he's saying that so these teachings that I gave you, that I taught you, they sakta, and you comprehended. You got it. That means you had enough time to understand it and know it. So you take these teachings of mine and Mashiach, so you understand it, but it's not just for you, but it's for them, for your students. That especially that inner elitist core we were speaking about, that the yuchlu gam hema lasis yuchudim aliyas kamecha, that they too should be able to make yuchudim and aliyas like you. Well, actually, I'm going to take that back a bit again, because it says v'yiskala ba'olam, be revealed in the world. So there's a thing that may be saying that even these ways of making yichudim, unifications, and aliyas, a sense of the soul, this isn't small things. This isn't just going around saying Baruch Hashem or singing songs. It's a serious spiritual work, right? So it seems like he's saying that Mashiach is saying when everyone or the bulk of the world can get there to that level, then he's going to arrive. But my feeling reading, I both this, but even more, I think there's a more expanded version of this letter, if I recall. You could read it actually. He's even that his own students should get to this level itself seems like would be a strong feat. Okay, let's see, continue and see why I think so. But once those who can or should or would, whether the world or the Baal Shem Tov students, get to that level of making the right yichudim and kavanot and aliyot, then yichlu kol klipot, all the klipot, all the negative dark forces will be obliterated. Yiyah israt and Yeshua, and it will be a time of great Hashem's open, pure goodwill and salvation. Right? V'timhati azeh. So he continues, and now I had Hashem says, and I was greatly surprised by this. By that, this is the meaning. I was shocked, surprised by Mashiach's answer and what he and the and what it would take for Mashiach to come to be revealed. And Baal Shem Tov says, I had great pain. Basically, how long it will take to spread these greatest teachings of Yechudim and Baal Shem Tov's teachings to the people, even to his students. And it'll take such a long time. So in some places it says V'yismarmer belibi, if I recall another version, that he has like his heart was like bewailing it, and he said so. He's continuing. When I was in this chamber, I learned there shleisha dvarim. Skules. I learned three things. Skulot. Again, skulot is like certain practices of ways to heal or prevent or do things. I just showed you earlier a book from a descendant of Baal Shem Tov, of his skulas, and that Baal Shem Tov was known for different skulot, especially being a medicine man. So he says when he was in the chamber of Mashiach, he received 3 skulot, how to do them, u'shleisha shemes hakdashim, and 3 holy names. That means 3 special secret Hashem God names. Let's not to confuse, not to mix religions here, but almost like God mantra names, secret ones that weren't known, but special formulas meant. And though he's learning it from up there, but they're easier to learn and to understand, or to expand upon their sect. Meaningly, there's these 3 sugulot and just 3 names. If you know how, if you could, what's the word? I don't know why I'm blanking out in my English. If you know how to, when you acquire, you get to know it well. You acquire the skill. If you know how to, please someone help me. English. If you master them, okay. If you master them, so then you'll be able to get there. And and once I realized that, then all right, now I was more at ease. That it is possible. There is. It does not seem impossible to do that for Mashiach to come. That there is a way and things we can do to bring him. But some people, by the way, there's a joke I heard from somebody like a funny that there's a Hasidic way of reading this text. And he says 3 skulot and 3 names, and then it says vehein. It says, and they are easy to learn and to interpret, right? But the Hasidic Ruler, it says vehein, that the 3 names themselves are these 3 words in Hebrew: benakel, milmed, ulefarish. Okay, but of course it's that's not the real pshat, but there's that, and I think there's even some pshat teachings of how these are 3 names of God. Okay, be it as it may. The Baal Shem Tov continues, but chashafti, and I thought, is it possible that through this, just through these 3 mer segulot and 3 names, people, the people of my age, that means people of my ilk, to come to a level like me, like my highest level, like Baal Shem Tov is saying, will it be that easy? It's such an easy spiritual fix. Like they say, you can either practice meditation, blah, 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 asceticism for 20 years, or you could drop a little psychedelic something and, and on some level it may be similar. I mean, maybe getting to an actual same experience in a certain way. But yeah, exactly. Jonathan says in the text chat, take 3 schools and 3 shamus and call me in the morning, 100%. Yeah. So in a way, not to belittle pure practice and not to overhype psychedelic substances, but and especially because there's a great, actually, speaking of this letter, there's a great long essay, I think I shared it in the past, of Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi about his first LSD trip and comparing it and contrasting it to this letter of Baal Shem Tov. And his summation is, he says towards the end, at the end, and no, the letter, the Baal Shem Tov's Aliyah was a more authentic one, and it was more long lasting and had more of an effect. And with LSD and whatever, he said it wears off and you're back to the grounds back to where you were originally. It's not necessarily transformational as much. I personally, I'm not sure why he described it that way, because you do know there's the famous Good Friday experiment of Harvard with psychedelics, psilocybin and LSD, I think, and that it has, and they followed up 25 years later with the seminarians who took it, and that yes, it was transformational for their lives. So I think what Reb Zalman means is that, in a way, it's a bit of an as real and amazing it is, there's a bit of an artificiality to it. It's not coming from within most. And I know myself when I was doing at certain times a straight meditation practice without any substances or anything, like serious, with no, like 10 days with no talking and just meditating. It reached certain effects, quote to psychedelic states, that any substances have never had it like that, like compared to that way. Was that it was both very clear and grounded and very it was like really up, like one of the most moving, even emotionally, type of experiences I've had. So there's something to be said that there's a letter from Lubavitcher Rebbe. He says, regardless of saying whether LSD, it's a letter about LSD itself, whether whether it's giving, what it's producing, what have you. But the mere fact that you're saying that you could just take something quickly and it'll have the effects, a strong effect right away, and all that without any work in it, then it's like if you say lo yagaiti matzasi al tamin, say I don't have to do work and I found something, then don't believe it. Meaning then it's not a real work all the way through. You know what I mean? So that is so that this Baal Shem Tov letter exemplifies that type of real sense, real aliyah. Okay, and he's saying here too, even that there is a shortcut even in kavanot to get there, and that the hainu b'yosem yachaylim laliyas neshamas yilmud v'yasil gam k'mayani. He's saying that, and with these three mayors, schools and names, they'll be able to make neshamas and learn and understand things like me. But okay, so he acquired the secret, super secret short formula from very directly from Mashiach's chamber. So in a way, it's the solution, because now all he has to do is share it, and then once everyone knows it, the secret's out, then Mashiach can arrive. But no, the catch here is they, the ones above, did not give me permission to reveal it all these years, to reveal it to everyone. However, I even asked them for you specifically, dear brother-in-law, to teach you this, and the irony is, it's easy to learn. It's not hard, but yet they didn't allow to learn, and they didn't even for you, dear brother. And I am sworn by above not to reveal what they are. But here's the last paragraph. But this I can tell you, inform you. Hashem yivazecha, and God should be at your help, and be the presence of the gods be in your way, and not and not forsake you, especially in the Holy Land, which is where his brother-in-law he's sending it to. That you should do the following: that the when you pray and you study, and you're enunciating, emitting the words from your mouth, you should have kavanah of some name. I'm not going to tell you what specific name. Each words and what have you is different, but you should, in general, have kavanahs of a certain name, divine name. Because in every letter of our prayers or our study Torah, there are these three things. There's the world where it is, its dimension. There's the soul of it, of this letter, and there's the divine potency of it. Okay, and these three interplays: the world, meaning dimension, the soul, and the godliness, God powers. But they ascend with our prayers and Torah study, and interconnect and unite one with the other. Right? There is, we know from the Zayah, there's three others: Yisrael, Eraisa, God, Israel, Torah, and God. This is a different form of it. Neshamas could be Israel, right? Soul. God is godliness and worlds. So these worlds instead of Torah here, but because we're learning the Torah also, but the Torah is going through them all. Okay. So when you each letter you have a kavanah, and you say and you work on connecting the world, soul, and God and divine elements of it, and that like locks in that they're a good entity. Now they could, like Lego stick pieces, they can now lock on to other letters that have been worked on, or like cells latching on each other, whatever you want, and found their axon neural connectivity, even if you want to look at it that way too. And now it's expanding one letter with another. Now it's creating words. That's interesting, and which is in itself now in this extreme unity. The tichlon nishmasechi imahem b'chol b'china b'china now, and you should include, and you should encompass in your soul with them every of these aforementioned aspects. And by uniting all the worlds together and ascending, that means with each letter bring these three elements aligned and connected, and the letters with words, and then going up and up and up. That makes it go ascent even higher. The nasim simcha v'taina gadol ein shir, and this in itself produces great immeasurable joy and delight above. As you could understand just by in a smaller dimension, like the joy of bride and groom in the real world, right? All the more so above, in the highest realms above. Certainly God will be your assistance. Anything you get involved in, you should succeed and perform. Okay, so this is the short version letter as mentioned. So just reading that. And now there's more than one way we could connect it. Even this theme with, I'll just put it out there with the two themes. It's connected with Malava Malka, because as we'll see, hopefully when we discuss it more, that Malava Malka is also about bringing, what are we talking about here? That Baal Shem is also learning that as high as you go, we have to still be down here in this world too, to make it happen, to spread it down here. And that there's also the idea of yichud is like we say Shem yichud kutcher brichul shchinte, to unite their ampin, let's say, and malchus shchina is not just up spiritually, but it also means merging the spiritual with the physical, like the soul with the body. So that we have also, in addition to Shabbos, of course, but on Shabbos, the soul uniting with the body is that the body is, in a way, becomes less body and becomes more spiritualized and becomes more elevated. That's the idea of elevation of the soul of Shabbos that we spoke at length. However, when it comes to Motzoei Shabbos, now the soul is coming back down into the body, meaning down, and meaning the body itself is coming back down more, becoming more physical, and the soul is coming into it more, and taking it to a new level. So remember last week we discussed at length what the body aspect of Motzoei Shabbat and with the loose stone and what have you. But there's also the interplay of the body of Shabbos and Motzoei Shabbos with the soul, and what is happening with the soul during this process. And the bottom line is that we get to a point where the soul, right after Shabbos, Motzoei Shabbos is the time where the soul can be part of the body as the body is on its most physical, ordinary level, not as the body is on a higher spirit, elevated level, but as the body is already down. There, the soul in its highest level can become fully unified with it, okay, and be one. And we're going to show how that's connected with things that's related to not only the meal like Malava Malka, but also how it's related to things like the Pesamim, incense, herb that was what we smell during Havdalah, and also the lights, the candles that we burn for Havdalah. Okay, which is connected with the soul element of Shabbos. Okay, and before we could go back to Malav Malcolm Baal Shem Tov, just to tie it into our parsha, because in our parsha too, the parsha is Kitzavay El Haaretz, it's about when you come into the land, the land that Hashem gave you, and that Hashem gave you. It says, the Shafta, right? That and then you will inherit it and shall settle in it. And it goes on. So there's different teachings on this, including a teaching from the Baal Shem Tov on it that maybe if we have time we'll look at, the way to connect with the Parsha. Incidentally, the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov on our Parsha was not said during the physical life of the Baal Shem Tov. It was channeled to the fifth Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Shalom Ber Lubavitch, during Chai Elul, that's this day, in year 1892. That he heard then, and around that time, 7 Torahs from the different Hasidic masters, and there was the teaching from the Baal Shem Tov that he heard. And maybe we'll look at it soon. But in general, it speaks about the first mitzvah is that when you settle the land, you grow produce, you should bring the first fruits to the temple, even before you bring the truma that you offer to the Kohen. First thing, even before that, you bring, it's known as bikurim, first growth produce and what have you. And then you go and the high priest takes it in its basket, lifts it, and there's a certain supplication saying it mentions the Exodus and other elements, the whole ritual thing. So this idea of coming to the land, settling the land, is brought down in Chassidus. I mean, there's a lot to talk about it, just as an aside, but really because of time constraints that we want to cover, and also, as mentioned before, I'm feeling like tonight not to go as late as I would maybe another night. I do want to get in as much as possible that's connected. And of course, a story also, right? We can do without a story. We're going to do music and things, but I'm starting to feel a little bit I should start winding down. And then not too much, not to go too late. Okay. Anyways, so coming to the land means our soul coming into this world. Right? So there's the way the soul comes into our body also. There's the way it is coming down into the body. So there, it's still the way it is channeled down. So it comes in, it's affecting our body, but it's not necessarily being on the lowest, most detailed level. It's when we settle, not just arrive to the land, but we begin working and settling the land and what have you, then that is integrating, functioning, and permeating the land itself. And the land is also the word for Ratzon, the willpower, and Mirza being a favor and being quick, like running, that is the soul coming into the body to do the work that's needed in the physical world. That's why we're born into a physical body and placed in the physical world to do this physical work of our spirit soul in our bodies, right? So this is the idea that there's the way it's still more highlighted from the soul perspective, more general way, but then there's the way it is from more integrated, meaning more unified in the details of the body. And as explains in Chassidus, that the body has 2 main parts of it: the force, the chayis, the life force of the soul. Again, it's chayel, day of chayis, of life. day of the birth of Hashem and the Alter Rebbe, which is why it's all interconnected with this life, birthing, and how the soul enters the body and unifies. So there's the general highest energy from the soul. That's called chayes haklali, and that is the same, or almost co-equal from head to foot, right? The soul energy that's of life force and all of everything. This that which makes our body alive. Wait, hang on 1 second. I'm sorry, there's someone visited. Wait 1 second. Okay, so yeah, there. All right, okay. So so there's the general part of the soul force in our bodies. But then that's the highest quality. Then there's the highest prati, the detailed, let's say, the power, the energy, life force of our eye. That's in our eyes is different than in our in our fingers, right? There's a specific function of eye to see that requires a specific articulation, precision of the life force to be for the vessel of the eye. It's different from the hand or from the ear, what have you. So that's the highest prati, the detailed. So there is the process when our soul comes into the world in a more general way. But the real work and the real way of unifying that becomes part and parcel of our physical body when it comes into all the deep particular parts of our bodies and our physical world. And once that is unified and it's done in a way that the soul refines the particulars of our physicality, that is when the purest of that merging and unifying unity is, okay? And that is ultimately the aim, the objective of the whole reason why our souls are in the body is to bring and reveal that it is all one. The unity of the soul and the body is to show that it's all that it is that which seems like they're so opposite each other. One is just pure spirit, non-physical. The other is purely physical. Yet we say they're now one. That means we're revealing the divine itself, which is beyond these opposites, right? So that is this on the soul level too. These two levels of how much we're in having an effect in the physical world. So it's also connected. And that's why it says not only you bring the fruit products, but they were in baskets. It means baskets. It's like different vessels. So it's like the fruit being the light, what have you, was all in their specific designations. So that some say it's actually the tena. By the way, tena, the word for basket, is tough nun aleph, is gematria 60. Some say you would give a 60th over for the bikurim. Also, bikurim is also, the first fruit is also a reference to souls of people or Jewish people, what have you. And because we were there from the beginning of their all creation, and we're also known as the firstborns, B'nai B'char Yisrael. So, which is also the word for B'char, Bikurim, what have you. So it's also a reference that we are returning to our very original state, a pure state, and it's this time of year too. It's connected to this time of year. Of time with Elul and Tishrei is a time of bringing in the work in not just more abstract and vague, but into the details. Both the Elul, Cheshbon, and Nefesh, that we work through all the details, especially at the end of the month now, and also into Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. that is how we truly reveal things, is when you're into the, as they say, not the devil is in the detail, but the divine is in the details. Okay, that should be the right phrase of it. So Gavald, so Mamish, that's not Parsha, and with and that was also the whole Baal Shem Tov way was also to bring it down into the world and merge and be very the whole idea. One of the innovations of Chassidus is the emphasis of avoda begashmis, the work in the physical world, and then there was also yeah, and with Malava Malka too, as we spoke about last week, there was the that there was that that there's the physicality of the loose bone is the only which was the only one that did not benefit from the tree of knowledge and only benefits its sustenance from Malava Malka. That is the origin. That's the beginning of the recreation, regeneration of the physical body for resurrection, and that will animate the body, meaning even not only just the body itself expands from it, but it reactivates the soul itself too. That means that the luz bone is the point where there's the most merging of this of the bone of the physicality of the body and the soul, which is also why it does not decay, because it is like the soul is eternal. The luz has even when the body is no more alive, it still carries within it, and albeit on a dormant level, the soul on some level in the luz bone. Okay. So what we'll do now is like this. This is what I'm feeling, because I'm also want to wind down honestly a little bit earlier tonight. So what we'll do is like this. I'll share a story of the Baal Shem Tov and Malava Malka. Okay. Does that sound that good? You want story time as we like wind down a bit, and then I'll tell you why, because I'm going to look into different texts about the extra soul that we're given for Shabbos. There's what's known as the Neshama Yisera, the extra soul. Okay. That now it's its own subject in a way. And there would be more to delve into. And if we start now, it may go on for more. So that's why I'm feeling maybe just to say a story, and maybe a little bit more from the parsha, but I you know what I mean. We could do a little bit, but let's at least do the story. Then we'll check it. Okay. Okay. So story time, everyone. So here's the story. And this is a story, both of them, as mentioned before, the three Lavdafkas, but this is Dafka story. It's a story about the Baal Shem Tov. It's a story about Malava Malka, and it's a story about people's I must say about the way it affects certain people's physicality and even finances. Parnas, basically. Okay, so here's the story. And also, this will be a story that will show why Malava Malka is so valued, and we'll also see from the story how it connects with what we were learning until now about the luz and the soul and all that. Okay, so here's the story. The Baal Shem Tov had a student who was a great Talmid Chacham, a great scholar, very and learn, both learned and pious, what have you. And he was invited to become a rabbi in a certain town. He was there, and he was very successful. He built it up. and everyone. And he was like recognized, and he was seeing success in it, yeah, in things built, yeah. As time went on, he was becoming more comfortable in his role, and so one day he's learning, and it was a really hot day, and he ran out of water. The water, he needed a water carrier to bring the water, he just ran out. And we couldn't go, didn't have time, didn't have whatever to go to the well and all that. So he looks out the window and he sees that there's a water carrier going with the buckets of water. So he calls out to the water carrier, "Hey, come, I would like some water." The guy ignores him. He calls out even louder. The water carrier ignores him. He runs out of the house, goes after him, ignores him. And finally, he gets up to him, and he goes, "A chutzpah! How could you ignore me? And I'm not just anyone. I'm the rabbi of the town." And he gives him a patch in the pundit, gives him a smack for being disobedient to the rabbi of the town. And you have to have covet, honor, and this is the opposite. You're making fun of, you weren't responding to me. What happened? So that is episode number 1 with him. Episode number 2 is that there was a meeting for the finances of the town to fundraise for a certain project of the town, for different things needed in the town. So some of the people in the meeting, some of the people of means said, "Yeah, we'd love to give more," or they were demanding people should give more. So we'd love to give more, but we actually give a certain part of our money, tzedakah, to this so and so poor person who used to be a great scholar, Talmid Chacham, but even had money, but who is a great scholar, had money, but lost his money, and we've been supporting him. And we can't, we don't want to give up giving him tzedakah. To which the rabbi answered, "No, guys, the tzarich tzibur, as it's called, the needs of the community, of the collective, overrules the needs of the individual, the private person. So therefore, no. I say you have to give to our projects, even at the expense of this poor family." And that's what started happening. People started giving less to that family, less, until eventually it even became less worthwhile, even for the gaveh, the tzedakah, to even take any few pennies and bring it down. That's how little there was left. So basically, they stopped giving money, and this family started going poor. So above in heaven, there was a big kittur, I guess you say. There was a big uproar about this. That look at this rabbi, a student of the Baal Shem Tov yet. And that he could behave, he could hit a water carrier, and he could make a poor Talmid Chacham even more hungry and take away money and food from him. He is to be punished. Something that is worse than death. What could be worse than death? It's that to shmat, to convert. And therefore, I'm going to send down a power that he's going to have an impulse to go and to convert. And that is what happened. This was on Shabbos, and right on Shabbos, right after Shacharis and Shabbos, the Rav of this town, takes his talis off, and almost like hypnotized, not knowing why, he just walks to the parish at the end, in town, the other side of town, knocks on the door. The priest answers, and he tells the priest he wants to convert. The priest is excited. Not only does the Jew want to convert, which is such a rare occurrence, but the rabbi of the town himself is all the more. So he invites him in, gives him his own special room, and some food, and even gives him some alcohol to drink to relax before they get ready for conversion. And he drinks and he eats, drinks, or whatever he does, he passes out drunk. Meanwhile, it's already the afternoon, and all the way, hundreds of miles away, in Mezhebush, the holy Baal Shem Tov, was sitting with his students to have the holy Shalashudas meal. And they're sitting around the candle lights are going out, it's getting darker. And one of the things Baal Shem Tov had, in addition, as we know, had putting the arms around the students, and they would have a psychic experience together. Another thing Baal Shem Tov would do, Shalashudas says, he would scan all the people he knew, particularly his students, that to see, even if they weren't there at the table, Shalashudas, with him physically, but he would tap in with them psychically. As we said before, the Baal Shem Tov's one great thing was to be mentally connected with things and people, and if that's where you are, and he to go and to see how his students are, even if they're hundreds of miles away, wherever they are. And so did the Baal Shem Tov, and he was scanning his students all around. It comes to this good Rav of this town, and he can't find him. Normally, you could find him in his town, in his community. He's looking up. He's looking up and down, up in heaven, and down there, and nothing. Can't find it. He's like disappeared off the soul chart map. No, where is he? He went undercover. What's the word? He went dark shadow or something. It's called stealth, right? Yeah. So what happened? So then he goes up in heaven, and he hears what happened. There's two things that this student did to poor water carrier, to the poor Talmid Chacham, and that's why he's destined to do this. Baal Shem Tov is trying to persuade them above, but don't you realize he really just meant it? He didn't really mean it, and he's this and that. But he said no. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry, Baal Shem Tov. No. He said he's gonna have to go through his Shema. Finally, at the end, Baal Shem Tov remembered that this student was one of his great mitzvah, pet peeve mitzvahs, was to wash his hands and to have a meal of malava malka. So he said, for malava malka, the baby for the schus, the great merit of him being so careful to have malava malka every Shabbos. Maybe for that, we could take off this gzeira of Shmad. Remember we read before, in the letter about the gzeira Shmad, that means that we force a Shmad, but the people wouldn't Shmad in the letter, and they could be killed. Here is a gzeira, the opposite, that that person will actually give into the Shmad. And we'll explain why soon. So be it as so. Here he said so. Baal Shem Tov is beseeching, maybe in the merit of him keeping this. Of this Rav keeping Malava Malka fastidiously, therefore he won't have convert. To which in heaven they think about it and they say, you know what, Baal Shem Tov, you have a point there, maybe, but not just because of the past. No, it has to be that now that this Shabbos, this Motzoei Shabbos, he's going to make Malava Malka, and if he does that, then he won't. So what happened was, meanwhile, with all the contemplation, everything happening, the Shalashudas of the Baal Shem Tov already went after sunset Shkia. It was already after the 3 stars came out in heaven. The Baal Shem Tov goes, and he takes 2 challahs that are on the table. He calls one of his students at the table. He tells him what the name is. It's called Wolf, Zev Wolf. So they'll take these 2 challahs. I want you to go out the door. Say Baruch Hamadim Kashachal, make Abdallah quickly. Take these 2 challahs and walk out the door. He didn't tell him where to go, who to see, nothing. Just take these 2 challahs, walk out. The student, Chassid, being real, faith in his Rebbe, takes the two chalas, walks out of the clay, the shtibel of the Baal Shem Tov, walks down to Mezhebush, the streets, and just a block or two later, before you know, he's walking, and whoop, before he knows it, he's in another town, and he's walking in another street, and he's not far from a parish. Basically, he had kfitzat haderech, the warp speed travel. You know, usually the stories of kfitzat haderech we hear the Baal Shem Tov and others is with a wagon, the horses let go, the horses run. But here was a special form of it, that the kfitzat haderech was pushed with feet walking on the ground. It was like, you know, it says with Yitzchak's time and the other that it wasn't as much that this is an interesting concept here. The kfitzat haderech, skipping the road, that quick magic travel, was not that as much that the person or the animal, or whatever, moved quickly like at Superman speed, but it was rather that the earth underneath folded up. That's the term. Underneath, it was like the earth underneath quickly but crunched up under, so a place ahead was now here already. Okay, it's an interesting counterintuitive way to look at it. Anyways, but this chassid has kfitzat haderech, and near parish he walks, and he winds up at a parish. He still doesn't know why he's there. He goes, he knocks on the door, and the same priest answers the door. It's already dark after Shabbos, right? Now the priest sees another Jew, and he's elated. And the priest goes, wow, he assumes this is another Jew that wants to convert. Why would a Jew ever come to his parish? And two in the same day, there must be some fad, there must be something in the Kiddush that day, or whatever you want to call it. It must be the in thing now for Jews to convert. And he's super excited. So here's another Jew. He says, oh, you're here? Great. And he takes him into the same room where the Baal Shem Tov's Rav, that chassid, his student, the Rav, is there, passed out. And he goes in, and now the door closes. Now they're alone together. And the second chassid with the chalas turns to the chassid, wakes him up from his drunk stupor, and he tells him, here, I have chalas for you to wash, to eat mavamalka. So he goes. So the guy goes. The Rav says, "What are you talking about? Don't you know I'm about to convert? I don't know why, but I just have this feeling I have to convert. So why should I wash? I'm not going to be a Jew soon anyway. So who cares? Why should I wash mavamalka?" So the chassid, it seems like Reg knew the other chassid. He knew his greatness of how much he adhered to Mav Malka. And he starts convincing him, telling, no, but don't you realize how much you love Mav Malka, and how you wouldn't give in to by hook or by crook, you'd always wash Mav Malka. Basically, you're still not a guy yet. Let this be your last thing to do as a Jew, and that's it. Let it just go out that way. Convince him to do it, and which he did. The chassid washed his hands. And as soon as he ate the bread from that the Baal Shem Tov divined the power gave to we give, which had infused with Baal Shem Tov's powers, he ate the challah, and suddenly, right away, the Rav had totally lost all interest in Christianity. In fact, was shocked how he could have even thought so, and he just wanted to leave and be part of Baal Shem Tov. So he wanted to go straight to Baal Shem Tov, but he didn't know how to do it. He told him, how are we going to get back? So the chassid who did the kfitzat haderech travel said, you hang on to my gartel, and you come with me back, like in Back of the Future, right? The professor tells Michael J. Fox, you just hang on to me, you come on my side, and we'll be able to both time travel together, right? And that's what happens. They sneak out of the parish without the priest noticing, and they go weep back to the Baal Shem Tov. They get back in time, but the Baal Shem Tov is still finishing up still sitting at the Shal Shodas. So for them, it was Rei Malav Malkav, the two sins by Baal Shem Tov, and they extreme, and that is how this chassid returned and became better, and that is also connected not only with Baal Shem Tov student, but with the meal of Malka Malka. And the way I understand it somewhat, also it's connected to what we were learning last week and a little bit this week, that again, that Malava Malka is the special meal for resurrection, and resurrection on a physical level. So of course, the ultimate like loss of everything is death, right? Death, physical death. But on some level, for the soul, at least, worse than physical death is spiritual death, right? That understood. If there's just the body death, so then the soul is actually released and it feels better. That's more. But if it is the soul carries the death element to it, so then it's way more difficult, harder. So more than physical death is spiritual death, which is in this story way is conversion. So in that respect, that was so to reinforce, to undo anything of death, especially spiritual death, had to be doing a physical thing of bringing back that spirituality to the physicality to prevent the spiritual death. And that is why it was only through the meal of Malka that leads to this level of ultimate resurrection, not only of body but also of soul. And that is also connected with the things of going into the land and the eternal and the life, and also speaking about Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, that their teachings are eternal, and leading to the Mashiach, who's of resurrection eternal. And just like we spoke about the two parts of in the life force in the body, whether in general way or particular, same thing. Chassidus, we could say the Baal Shem Tov's birthing and bringing the light of Chassidus to the world, was in the general way that affects everything, but in a more general way. And the Alter Rebbe brought it more in a deeper, particular way, both through mind, Chabad, and even through the other faculties of self, more in a detailed and integrated way, that we could say. So that's why it's all connected, and that's also the teaching of our parsha, especially transforming the curses into blessings, as we've spoken about multiple times. And there's other parts of the parsha. And also the end of the haftarah is about Kumi Ari Erech, rise my light, come to light, that our light and God's light become one. These are also the two lights. The Alter Rebbe's name is Shnei Or, two lights. And these are also two lights, the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, the two lights of Chassidus, that at least from this angle. And there's more to speak, but I'm feeling like to wind down. And I had more to speak about Elul, but that also will be more. So we'll carry it over for next week. We're gonna focus more on the Malava Malka and things about Elul that we've been holding back. So we have been speaking about Baal Shem Tov and Alter Rebbe in relation to being in Elul. In short, that the work we're doing in Elul is also the trajectory of the work of Chassidus as taught from the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe. Maybe we'll flesh that out more next week. And in general, more on Elul, just in time before Tishrei, okay? Rosh Hashanah. So,
Baruch, a quick question about the story. Is the spiritual death here being compared or likened to the concept of karet?
Not necessarily. I think, in the story it is shmad. So, I'm on the you mean how it's affecting the soul? Yes, I would say actually yes, because it is cutting off the major cord, Tziyako Chever Nasalase, which is the idea of shmad, cutting off, the essential. Hang on one second.
Just while he's gone, karet being the concept of being spiritually or physically cut off from the rest of the Jewish people.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I would generally agree with you, yes. But even though it doesn't say, but that's what we do say, that the karet is like every mitzvah, every part is like one core strand of a rope made up of 613 strands. Karet is when the majority are cut off. So meaning the more existential of an issue it is, the more it is, cutting off the line basically. So yeah, I can see a correlation. Shmad is related. I think Shmad is even worse than Kares, if you ask me, because Kares you see is for a certain averut that it's not even like Shmad, even less than Shmad. So I would say it's even worse than Shmad.
Shmad is self-inflicted.
All right, and well, doing an averut is self-inflicted, and then the karet is the response. I'm saying the cutting severance of the soul that happens through Shmad would be worse than the severance of the soul done through the averut in the Torah, for which officially you get karets. That's just my feeling, or my sense of how it works.
Thank you.
All right, great. Any more questions or anything before we tune out? And again, we'll continue next week on these things. I'm just like, as mentioned earlier, why we're cutting it a little bit shorter tonight, okay? Okay, Laila Tov Varach. Good Shabbos, Jonathan. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos, Steve. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos, Dana. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos, Dorit. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos, Danny. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos, Yossi. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos, everyone else who tuned in tonight. Good Shabbos. And again, throughout the week, you could always contact me and everyone out there in Facebook land. Have good Shabbos. I'm stopping the live stream on Facebook.